Broadcasting from the Red Bed Plains, you are now listening to Through the Prairie Smoke.
Hey y'all, we're still in the smoke. Tyler's about to tell us about his book.
We're back.
And that's good. Let's go. All right, guys. Are you ready to hear the story
Yes,
of
please, Tyler. I
Albert
can't
Bender, 3 men, flying saucers?
I've been thinking about this for weeks.
Okay, so I've mentioned Gray Barker before. He wrote a book called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. That book came out in 1956. And it is about all of the weird conspiracy type things that happen around people who study flying saucers. Now, a large majority of Gray Barker's book was about Albert Bender's experience. So, Gray Barker started talking to Albert K. Bender, who ran the first saucer investigation group, according to Flying Saucers Are Real by Jack Womack. That group was the International Flying Saucer Bureau. And it just so happens that I have the collected issues of Space Review for the years 1952 to 1954. It only ran 2 years because the Men in Black came to Bender and said, stop talking about this. So anyway, Space Review's first issue was in October of 1952. The first part of it mostly chronicled sightings. The first issue connects saucer sightings with the formation of the International Flying Saucer Bureau. When he started organizing people, suddenly there's a huge flap. A whole lot of sightings in a specific place during a certain amount of time. There's an editorial page and a review of current science fiction. Then there's also like an ad from a planetarium. Then a lot of sightings by members. The next issue is in January 1953. So it's not every month, it's every couple of months. And they put together this issue.
It's like our podcast.
Just, that's right. In Volume 2, Number 4, distributed in October 1953, there's an interesting editorial comment and a statement of importance. This is the last issue, by the way. The mystery of the flying saucers is no longer a mystery. The source is already known, but any information about this is being withheld by orders from a higher source. We would like to print the full story in Space Review, but because of the nature of the information, we are sorry that we have been advised in the negative. We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious.
Whoa.
And then nothing was said. And so everyone who was super excited about this and was like, I want to be in the flying saucer group and all that stuff, they get this and like, it's over? What happened? And so during this time, in reality, the Air Force had a unit that was looking into flying saucer sightings. And so it was a big thing with the Air Force is trying to silence this because there's something the public just can't handle. And so that was the assumption. The government got to him and he can't talk anymore. The editorial speaks about how little science is reported in the newspapers, anxiety about stockpiling of atomic weapons, and the future of humanity. It ends with this. The men in the saucers are much wiser than we think. Why should they destroy us when we will no doubt do it ourselves? And these are existential questions about today. I mean, we're talking about early 50s. They watched the atomic bomb drop a decade ago, within the decade. So it's on people's mind. We can destroy ourselves now. We don't have to imagine monsters are coming from outer space. So that's all of that, I think, is fascinating commentary from that time period. So that advice to be very cautious, that is Bender mentioning the type of encounter that you get with the Men in Black. Eventually, Gray Barker convinces Bender to write the story, and it becomes Flying Saucers and the 3 Men, Albert K. Bender. Gray Barker writes the intro, the epilogue, and he has notes throughout. Saucerian Books, who is the publisher, that was in Clarksburg, West Virginia. In general, I think Barker made some claims, and his attitude towards skepticism was, prove it didn't happen this way. And supposedly he was a skeptic himself, but he was also a hoaxer and an embellisher.
Yeah.
Gray Barker wrote a story about Indrid Cold. It's called The Night the Earth Stood Still. It's Woody Derenberger's story, except that it's from Indrid Cold's perspective.
Interesting.
And so he's like talking about flying the spaceship and seeing his controls and stuff like that. Woody talks about going into one of those ships, but even then, like, you don't know that, dude.
Yeah,
like, this is total embellishment. Like, it's fine to say that this is based on this experience, but you can't sell it like this is the experience.
Right. The one that stands out to me that I read about was, like, he created a letter. What was the other guy's name? Adamski?
George Adamski.
Yeah. James Mosley and Gray Barker sent a fabricated letter from the U.S. State Department to Adamski saying, stop talking about aliens. But they wrote it. They stole letterhead to put it on. And the thing that's sort of troubling about that to me is that Adamski basically built an entire, like, public speaking career around this
kind of a religion.
This false letter that Barker was partly responsible for. And then even when they came out and said, we made it up, he just continued to say, no, they're lying about making it.
Yeah.
So weird and confusing.
Yeah. And that's the complicated thing with Gray Barker stuff. And there are some things where there's a fella, I want to say his name is Andrew Colvin, and he compiled a lot of John Keel's writings. And going through some of that, there are letters where apparently Gray Barker is writing like, I can't believe John thought this was real. I thought he knew I would be pranking him on the phone like this. And so there are some of those things where it's like, they're all buddies, just like any circle when you get in with these types of people. It's like, well, and I know they believe in these crazy things like Bigfoot can teleport. I'm going to call him and say I'm Bigfoot and tell him something crazy. That's an exaggeration, but it's very similar to what Barker was doing.
Yeah. I worry about the impact of his influence on Bender. Mm-hmm. Because if he's the one who's encouraging Bender to, like, write about his experience, is there, when you have things reflected back to you, sometimes they are exaggerated and then that becomes your truth.
Yeah.
And I think that happens to everybody.
Co-creation.
That's a very normal thing. I'm not, like, saying, like, Bender is actively trying to deceive anyone. Mm-hmm. But it happens.
Sure, of course.
And so that's some of the stuff that I think about this is, like, where is the root truth? And what can we maybe, like, filter?
Unfortunately, when we start distilling it like that, the story becomes less fun.
Oh, I disagree.
Oh, okay.
But people have fun in different ways.
Yes, of course, yeah.
For me, the fun is trying to find, like I said, that root truth. That root truth doesn't necessarily mean debunking the whole thing.
Sure.
It means this came from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I like the mystery of, like, where it actually came from.
Sure.
That's part of my whole everything is fairies thing.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's trying to find that root truth that crosses over all of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but, again, it's not fun for some people. That's why we have more than one person on this podcast.
Sure.
Because we're all having different kinds of fun. Right, Dustin?
That's right.
Were you going to say something earlier?
I was going to say Gray Barker, like about pranking John Keel, pranking this guy. It's like, what's your end game? Like
He's trying to sell magazines.
buddies are like, we'll joke around, and I could see buddies doing that where, like, I'm going to throw him off and do this. But you don't let it keep going.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem.
When
so
you
what
realize,
was his end game on this?
I don't know.
Like,
when
it
you
almost
realize,
makes it selfish.
Yeah.
It almost makes it like he wants his material to look authentic, and he wants everybody else's. It's almost like he was trying to gain something out of it. Like,
yeah, I mean, the letter was written in
because why would you let that guy go so long?
But he didn't come out and say that it was a hoax until 85.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even his idea to come out. Mosley basically confessed, yes, I was in on it.
Well,
so for me, I think he's maybe a little bit more of a bad actor than...
That is the consensus in reality.
Oh, okay.
He's a bad faith actor. In Bender's story, he tried to appease Gray several times, but...
So, Barker is the first one to write a book specifically about Men in Black.
In this understanding.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
post-fairy.
Bender-related Men in Black stuff.
And it's largely influenced by speculations that Gray Barker made about Bender's experience, because Bender would not tell him exactly what happened.
Right. But none of this is things that Barker actually experienced.
No.
That's where I was lost. I'm back in now.
I'm going to give you a heads up of where we're going. It's ghosts and UFOs.
I read some descriptions that I literally wrote in my notes. Hang on. Just so you know. Flying saucers and the three men. Mm-hmm. Floating and emitting blue light. Mm-hmm. That's what made me think ghosts.
Their eyes glow. He can't see their figure at first. He just sees mist.
Yeah.
So it
sounds like ghosts.
It also starts as poltergeist activity. Mm-hmm. So it's another one. And this is where, and these are really interesting conversations. There are people who want to believe in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. There are flesh and blood critters coming in physical devices, visiting us from somewhere else. And that's what they think it is. It is a superior alien race. Mm-hmm. And so any other info that's not related to the physicality, they ignore. Mm. But most, especially modern UFO stuff, it's like, my dad died 3 months ago. Not mine. But the story is, my dad died 3 months ago, and a spaceship landed in my backyard last night, and they invited me on board, and my dad was in there, along with my grandfather, and we had a conversation. And then I got off the ship and watched it take off. Like, what do you do with that? You know? Like, I want to believe that if I believed in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, I'd want to believe that they came down in a physical ship.
Yeah.
But then how do you explain the grief and the death aspect of meeting your deceased parent or grandparent in the flying saucer who tells you a story or gives you a message? What does that mean? So, the book itself, this is just kind of my impressions of the flying saucers and the three men. Bender was collecting anomalous clippings from newspapers about lights in the sky and stuff like that. But then he saw the Flight 19 mystery in the newspaper and wondered if the anomalous sightings were related to the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945.
What's this? I don't know about Flight 19.
Okay, so
or maybe I have heard of it.
You likely have heard of Flight 19. December 5th, 1945, 5 Avenger torpedo bombers left on a navigational training flight over water. They left from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The 5 planes and the entire crews were lost. So, 5 planes, 14 naval aviators. And then there was a Navy plane that was launched to search for Flight 19, but it was also lost with 13 crew members on board. This was pre-flying saucer. This is 2 years before Roswell. So, like, when lights in the sky are being talked about, there's not the flying saucer connection yet.
Well, and it's also not the end of the Pacific Theater in World War II yet.
Not quite. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, nearing the end, but not there yet. So that's all in people's minds as well.
Right. So what happened? Where did these go? In the radio transmissions, it looks like the instruments failed in the plane. And then some little islands were mistaken for the shoreline, and he took his team down and just crashed. Then the Navy flight that went out to look for the 5 torpedo bombers, that one was just an explosion on board randomly.
Wow, though.
It is the Bermuda Triangle. So Bender is doing his own research because he thinks maybe the lights in the skies are also fiddling around with our military, Navy stuff. And going to his local library, he finds the works of Charles Fort, which, of course, we've talked about. A lot of times people credit him with the invention of the supernatural. That is a ridiculous oversimplification. No, Charles Fort was just compiling all of these unusual stories, and it became to be known as Fortean, stories of frogs raining from the sky and things like that. All of these unusual occurrences, that's just Fortean. So anyway, he finds that at his local library. Look at all this trouble you get into at your library.
It's good trouble, man. Mm-hmm. You got to get into that good trouble at the library.
To Bender's knowledge, no one was describing these things in the sky as spaceships. Post-World War II, we were rocket and space travel crazy as a society. So it looks like Bender's view is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. From the beginning, he was thinking aliens. He was like, these are some sort of living organism that is coming in a nuts and bolts physical craft that you can see, touch, and interact with. He becomes extremely interested in astronomy. He sets up his telescope and begins to consider his place in the universe. His knowledge is expanding about place and things like that. And as he's staring out into space, he wonders if there's anything staring back. That fun mystery. So he has a little bit of this paranoia from the start. He loves the atmosphere and romance of haunted houses, and he tries to turn his own living space into a haunted house. He lives with his stepdad in the attic. He paints the walls with monsters from famous movies. He's got fake bats and stuff hanging from the ceiling, like he wants to live in a haunted house. And people are like, this guy's crazy. And I'm like, these people obviously don't know me and my buddy Dustin.
I was going to say, that's how I decorate my house.
Yeah, no kidding.
I just pulled the fake skulls out of my fireplace a week ago.
Yeah. Why don't you leave them in all year?
Well, because we're going to have our kitchen remodeled.
Oh.
And the fireplace is right next to the kitchen, and so...
Even better.
Yeah. So when the interior designer came over to look about remodeling, I was like...
these need to go.
No, she didn't say that. She didn't say that. She actually said, oh, those are cute. And I was like, oh, crap. I had forgotten they were in there.
Well, they've already seen it then. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I got embarrassed anyway, which is dumb.
That's one of those things. Like, this dude is living for himself.
That's right. Good for him.
He's a bachelor. He's got this attic space to himself, and he's just covered it in stuff he loves.
Yeah.
Just like me and my buddy D.
Yeah. just like it. There's a lot of stuff I'd still want to put out, but
yeah,
you got to share the space.
That's.
But at least we have kind of the same taste,
same style.
Yeah. We have skulls across our living room too, and we have skeletons
and
that
dolls.
Hang out.
Lots of dolls.
I heard about
And dolls. Lots of dolls. Yeah.
Someday when you're comfortable, we'll have to share those images on Instagram for the followers.
I don't know if I can hang with the dolls. Everything else I'm cool with.
Well, at least she has them all bunched up in a crib.
They're all in a crib.
Behind the couch.
That's not better.
I mean, they're all in one area, so you don't have...
You'll see them on the way to the
there's a few
bathroom.
spread out, but yeah.
So his friends call it his house of horrors, and on stormy nights he tells spooky stories.
Nice.
That's what he's doing. This is what he's doing. What we're doing right
now.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody needs a hobby. Come on. He also starts collecting chiming clocks.
Oh, awesome!
And he's like, but you get 12 of them, and they all chime. But you've also got to wind all of those clocks, so I don't recommend it.
I want a grandfather clock. I just want one. I have a fond memory of staying at my cousin's house, and at one end of the house was the living room. At the opposite end of the house was the bedrooms. I remember in the middle of the night you would hear the chimes, and it just sounded distant but loud too.
Yeah,
like it was creepy, and I just always remember that. And
Dustin, will you heat up some more water for me?
Why are you drinking out of a Stanley, dude?
What'd you say to me?
Stanley cups.
Yeah,
why are you drinking out of a Stanley
cup? Why are you drinking out of a Stanley cup?
Get this. They're not cool anymore.
That's dumb.
This is funny. We have 4 of them, but she did not buy them during the craze. 2 of them, the hospital gave her. So anyways, my 2 cups that I normally bring here, my Killer Clowns cup and my freaking Ghost cup.
Yeah.
Both broke within a day. I was so upset because the Killer Clowns one is... There was a whole story to that cup. My favorite cups. I told Amber I need to go to something a little stronger.
Sticker. Susan's going to find that for you.
I'm definitely going to put a Through the Prairie Smoke one on there. That smells amazing.
Yes,
Just
this
so
is a
you know.
different tea.
That has cinnamon in it, don't it? Yep.
It's a different tea. I freaking love it. It's my favorite winter tea. So I don't know why I'm drinking it today. I just wanted it, I guess. Anyway, that is not relevant to this podcast at all.
Bender's family has a history of strange occurrences. We've talked about with these liminal people, a lot of times they don't just start that way. There's history. It seems like it's hereditary, these types of things. He had, one of it involved a grandparent seeing a black dog or something like that, and then someone dying, so.
That's a fetch.
So those are the types of stories that Bender heard about his family. He's primed for this stuff. Mm-hmm. He's into sci-fi. He's into horror. He decorates his living space like a haunted house. Like, he is our target demographic.
He's our target demographic.
Mm-hmm.
For the podcast.
And similar to us, yes.
Perfect. Man, perfect. That's all the true crime librarians. We just got to get them in here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. His bureau's goal, he sets up the International Flying Saucer Bureau, and the goal is stated in April 1952, to collect the stories, meet the people, and be the point of contact for the extraterrestrials should they choose to land with a friendly gesture. The first meeting of his new society was May 15th, 1952. The first issue's coming out in October. During July and August, sightings were in the news. He had clippings coming in from all over the place to collect. On July 30th, 1952, in the evening, Bender gets a call on the phone, and when he answers, no one is on the line speaking, but he senses someone there. And then his head starts to hurt, and he hears a noise, like humming through the line. And Bender thinks that he receives a message to stop looking into the flying saucer mystery. The noise stops, and he hears the dial tone. His buddies in the society told him not to worry about this, because he's telling all his friends, like, hey, I think I just got this message over the phone. Nah, don't worry about that. The response to the issue was mostly favorable from Bender's perspective. About a week after the issue released, Bender was on his way home from a movie about 11:15 p.m. No notes on what the movie was or if it was any good. Thanks, Bender.
Men in Black.
Yeah.
They were like, don't talk about that movie either.
Yeah. He walked down a secluded street and he felt his ears clog, and the headache that he experienced while he was on the phone, it returned. And he forced himself to look up and saw a blue streak in the sky. And again, he gets the impression that someone or something is trying to tell him to stop his flying saucer endeavors. So just this feeling. And then everything suddenly returns to normal. When he gets home, he notices that there was a blue light emanating from his room. So he pushes open the door, and there's this giant blue object glowing in the center of his room. It doesn't have any firm lines or edges. It's just this glowing, misty blob just in the center of his room. He flips on the light, and he describes it as an effect. It instantly disappears. He notes that the room smells like sulfur, and some of his saucer files have been disturbed. Also, the radio is on, but it's tuned to a band where no station is coming through. And he doesn't think anything is missing. So, with Space Review going out, there is a whole lot of interest overseas. There's a fellow who wants to be a member. The International Flying Saucer Bureau was like, well, why don't you just be the representative for the British area?
Just represent all of Great Britain. Cool.
And this fellow's name is Dennis P. Plunkett, and he says, no, I've got to do 2 years of service in the RAF, but I think my dad would be interested. And he sends his dad's resume to the International Flying Saucer Bureau. It's so funny, because you're like, these are respected men, they're dudes trying to start their little club, and they're looking for reach and representative and all that stuff. So Dennis's dad is Edgar L. Plunkett. He's a retired Army captain. He's been a radio man for 14 years, and he sends a statement to the IFSB, and he says, I have a long, deep-rooted interest in the phenomenon. And so they asked Plunkett if he wants to do a localized magazine and reprint whatever you want from Space Review. So that was how that worked. At one of the British meetings that Plunkett is at, a medium calling herself Nurse Woodall contacted the spirit of Marconi. Are we familiar with Marconi? Essentially, he is who developed the radio. So here is... the radio was on in Bender's room, and spirit mediums talk to all sorts of people. This spirit medium talked to Marconi all the time, just like the Fox sisters talked to
Wireless
Benjamin Franklin.
telegraph.
Wireless telegraph
Yes.
is Marconi.
Yes. Which is, I think, more supportive of what you're kind of asserting, because it is a way of like communicating across. I'm just being more specific because telegraph. I think the telegraph thing ties in a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, Marconi's been dead for a little bit. This British medium is reaching out and asking him saucer-related questions. According to Marconi's spirit, the saucers were from Mars and were coming to Earth in March or April. Martians are little creatures that eat fruit, but drink no water because there isn't any on Mars. And apparently, their fruit is flown in from somewhere.
Yeah. These are not scientists.
Yeah. The Martians know all about the work of the IFSB, even though it has just been formed.
Sure.
Bender doesn't think the seance was taken very seriously. So then a French branch joins up, and you speak French, don't you?
Can I read it?
Yes, please read it.
I might be able to do it if I can see the words. Oh, International de Succu Volonté. That's as close as I can get.
There's another seance that's not very popular, but this is just one of those things. The culture experiencing all of these new and exciting things, everything is blending in. When we were growing up, ghosts are their own things.
Yeah.
Aliens are their own things. Cryptids are their own things. And really, that's a pretty modern way to view the phenomenon. Because it used to just be like, that's all just weird.
Yeah.
December 1st, 1952, Bender gets a letter from an Australian flying saucer bureau. It's one dude, Edgar R. Gerald, and he is drowning in sightings from the South Pacific. Gerald becomes the Australian representative to the IFSB, and then New Zealand follows up. They have 2 UFO groups, and Bender becomes the U.S. representative for them. So it's not just absorbing everybody's group.
It's cross.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of collaboration. The IFSB was also trying to get prominent members, like who can we brag, who's a member. They reached out to Albert Einstein, and he wrote back, but replied that he had nothing to add. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out. No thanks. November. Issue's been out for a month. This is the first. Like, he sees this blue stuff in his room that's glowing, and I don't know, I think that's pretty shocking, but you could pretty easily dismiss that, I think.
I couldn't.
You don't think you could?
Not at that time period.
Okay. All right.
You know what I mean? What could it be?
And with the smell that's
the smell is
sulfur.
what gets me is I don't know how you would explain that part.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
lighting,
just toots.
Lighting does weird things.
Toots. Everybody toots.
Oh, everybody toots. Yeah.
Yeah. So the smell.
He lives with his stepdad. His dad's up there just ripping ass
Eating
all day.
boiled eggs all
But
day long.
the light, I think, is harder to explain.
Yeah.
Than the smell.
Let's see what you think of this.
All right, love it. Do it. Go for it.
In November, Bender goes to see a movie. And while he's in the theater, he gets the sensation that he's being watched. So he starts looking around. And there's not many people in the theater. And he, again, doesn't mention what movie he was watching or if it was any good.
How are we going to do the pop culture element of this podcast?
Nobody's helping us out.
If he won't tell
Men
us
in
the
Black
movies. It was Men in Black 2. Yeah.
Suddenly, there is a person sitting to his right. Just suddenly, there.
Okay.
He has turned to look at this person, and this person is dressed in a black suit, black shirt, black tie, black hat.
Oh, not a white shirt, a black. Oh.
Black. Everything's black. It is black.
Okay.
And his eyes are glowing. And at first, Bender can't look away because he's like, is it reflected off of the screen?
Sure.
What am I seeing here? And so he looks back at the screen like, what am I going to do? This dude just appeared next to me. It's really strange. What am I going to do? And as he looks back, dude's not there anymore. So, dude was on his right.
Sure.
Looks back at the screen. Looks back at the dude. Dude's gone. He's like, oh, maybe I just managed it. Oh my God, dude's on the left now.
Oh, yeah.
What the heck?
Dude's on the left, looking right at him, glowing blue eyes. Bender gets up and goes to another part of the theater. Sits down. Dude doesn't follow him, and he starts trying to watch the movie again. Suddenly, he feels that way again, and as he turns around, dude is directly behind him, just staring at them with those glowing eyes. So he pulls a Karen, and he goes out to talk to the manager. He gets up and leaves the theater. He talks to the manager, and he's like, there's this guy in there. He's dressed in a suit, and he's got a hat on, but he keeps harassing me. And so the manager's like, okay. And he sends an usher And the usher comes back and is like, nobody's in there that meets that description. What, was it glowing eyes, do you think? Was that? I found a lot of people in there, but none of them's eyes were glowing.
How good could that movie have been?
That he wanted to stay?
That he stayed as long as he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It would take the second time that I saw something like that, I would be like, I am no longer interested in anything that's happening on the screen.
Yeah. My reality is more important than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that makes me doubly mad he didn't say what movie it was. I want to watch this incredible movie.
Right, yeah. He feels foolish. He thinks, I must have imagined this whole thing. People's eyes don't glow. Usher comes back like, nobody's in there that meets that description. Manager's shrugging. Like, okay, well, I'm done seeing a movie. I'm too embarrassed. I'm going to leave. And so he goes out to window shop, which is apparently something people used to be able to do before the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Mm-hmm. He's looking at photography equipment and stuff like that. And as he's looking at these things and shopping, he gets that feeling again. And he starts looking around and realizes that the guy with the glowing eyes is now at the end of the street and has been watching him this whole time.
Eyes are still glowing.
Eyes are still glowing.
Is it daytime or nighttime?
It's daytime.
How can he tell?
I don't know the answer to that question, but he can tell in his perception. So he bails from that place and finds the nearest policeman, which apparently policemen just hung out during the 50s as well.
Oh, yeah, they definitely did.
Okay.
Beat cops.
Beat cops.
That's because it was a lot harder to call the police.
I see.
And so they had to sort of be around all the time, I assume.
Police officer can't find the guy he's talking about. Like, I'm looking where you're looking. Bender can't see him anymore either. Bender's getting a little panicky and thinking about the episode of the glowing light in his room. He's like, what am I going to find when I get home? Everything was fine, and he slept fine. Everything was fine. It was all fine. It was just a weird day of unusual things.
I'm sure you're going to get to this. I have another question.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm leaping to conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
But the assumption is all the information that you're giving me does not tell me that these men in black are American government officials.
Right.
I don't want to bring up the movie because we know that's not the
right.
movie. But it's like that whole question that I have in my mind. Like, who are they protecting? Who are they for? Even if they're not American government officials. Ooh, spooky. They don't want me to find out.
You're talking too much.
Yeah,
You're asking the wrong questions.
Warn you to be very careful. No, I piles of crap around here and they reshuffle sometimes. Don't worry about that at all.
So my point is, I had always assumed that it was the government, it was the Air Force, it was whoever trying to keep these guys silent. But this seems like it's not.
This is 100% paranormal. What Bender is experiencing is paranormal activity. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Well, with the characteristics, levitating, glowing eyes, vanishing, appearing.
If we look at examples of this, both from pop culture and from what you guys know way more about than I do, pop culture, it seems like the majority is these men are paranormal. And the Men in Black movie is like the one exception where they are humans working for some sort of organization based on Earth.
You have hit what I think is a really interesting conversation, because it's like talking about the ET phenomenon as literal things versus these are messengers from somewhere else. It's like, no, we know science, we know observable reality. We will buy that a spaceship can get here from somewhere else due to something that we can't do right now. But we'll say, yeah, you can do that, and yes, it was an alien. Or none of that stuff matters. These other entities just bounce in and out whenever they want. They are the tricksters. They make up daimonic reality. Here's Western science trying to give you a reason to say UFOs are real, and here's the spiritual aspect saying it can be anything.
Where do you think Bender and Barker stand on this?
So, Bender, spoiler alert, they're aliens. The Men in Black, in Bender's experience, are alien ghost things.
So where do we get the idea that they work for the government?
Because since he didn't say anything, he was like, I can't talk about this anymore. At some point, I'll be able to talk to you about it. And so everyone just assumes government got to him.
The government's shutting him down.
Yeah, because what else could it be?
And then that myth persists.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just did the whole podcast in 5 minutes. I apologize, guys.
No, that's all right. You're there. You're there. Yes, that's what we're getting.
I really jumped ahead.
The Air Force is looking into this stuff. They have a group that's looking into UFOs.
But they're not the Men in Black.
They are not the Men in Black.
Gotcha.
And what's interesting about John Keel's experience with his experiencers that are talking about the Men in Black, they are just so unusual, and they are part of the phenomenon. They are not us.
Gotcha.
What's interesting, you brought up the fella needing the glass of water, sugar water.
Sugar water. I love it.
Gray Barker is almost 7 foot tall. And if he's out there hoaxing, I could totally see Gray Barker dressing in a black suit, wearing pants that don't fit well, saying, my friends call me tiny, get me some sugar water. Because he knows these stories, and he is meeting the expectations. So I could see that. But like I said, I don't know enough about it.
It could be both.
It could be, yeah.
I mean, that's where I keep coming back to, like, where's the root truth?
Mm-hmm.
Because the root truth leads to more truth, but it also leads to fiction, right? And so...
And let's talk about the time period before there was internet. Like, I have people who come up onto my front door here and ring the doorbell, and I can see them through my doorbell camera, and I'm like, they're here to serve me papers or sell me solar panels. It could be anything. And if I were more paranoid, that's somebody that's here to get me because I'm doing something I'm not supposed to. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it wrong, I'm sure. Or it's just, no, they're doing it.
Or they know about this podcast.
It could be.
Coming to warn you.
Coming to warn me. Never answer my door.
I am saying that as a joke, but also, like, that is
you can see how people would see that.
The experience that these guys are having.
Absolutely,
which is like...
We talk a lot about boredom. Like, these people are so bored. They're coming up with, like, this weird thing happened, and I've got nothing else to think about but this weird thing for the next 2 weeks. So now, what was it? And, of course, you would pull in your influences. You would try to shove it into whatever makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, it's what grounds you.
That's right.
And that's why that's why the Men in Black have always been perceived as government, because
in a
that's a natural grounding.
Yeah. What else could it be?
Like, what else could it be? The highest power in the United States or on Earth is government. So it has to be government.
They're the ones with the power.
Well, and it's also it's bizarrely patriotic to assume it's the government in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because if it's not the government, then it means the government is less powerful
isn't in control.
than whatever this is.
So this is jumping to modern times, but you've got this fellow Luis Elizondo out there talking about how this is a threat to national security that we don't know what this is. I'm not an expert. I'm not flying planes up there. I'm not in government intelligence, but I'm just extremely skeptical of that because I think we have been seeing this for our entire course on this planet. They've been here this whole time. Whatever they are, it's been, and it may be us. It may be us projecting things.
Sure.
Who knows?
It may be the power of story.
It could be. It could just be.
Which sounds so loosey-goosey.
Dismissive.
But I have a lot of sincerity when I say that.
Yeah.
The power of story.
I watched movies. We watched movies growing up over and over, VHS and stuff like that. And it's like, these are stories that we can apply to our life,
and story is as old as humanity, essentially.
Yeah. And with this description of Bender and how he sets up his house, this is what he does. This is what he's into. Telling stories, being spooky.
Which doesn't help his case.
Does not help his case.
Yeah.
All of his friends are like, he's got his house of horrors up there. He's telling us spooky stories when it's thundering and lightning outside. This is what he likes to do. And then suddenly he just shuts up.
Yeah.
So you could see how his friends would be like, what's going on? He's like, I can't talk about it. Like, did they get to you? Like,
who's they?
I've been visited by 3 men. Well, tell us about them. They wear all black. Where are they from? I can't tell you that. So anyway, and then...
But he can't tell them that because he knows, or he doesn't know?
Unknown.
He knows the secret, but he can't tell you the secret. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Almost a month before the first issue of Space Review comes out, the Flatwood Monster incident happens. It's September 12th, 1952, Flatwoods, West Virginia. Gray Barker enters the paranormal picture in earnest. The IFSB did not have any West Virginia investigator members, so they relied on newspapers, and the newspapers completely dismissed the Flatwoods landing and monster sighting as a hoax.
This is after Mothman.
This is before Mothman. This is 15 years.
In
15 years before
okay.
Mothman.
Okay.
Have you seen pictures of the Flatwood Monster?
No.
It looks.
I don't know
like
much about the Flatwood Monster, but
I'll show you.
Considered a cryptid now. Looks like a bell with a red face.
I can see how that'd be related to Mothman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's same part of the country. Mm-hmm. It's got Mothman-y vibes.
Mm-hmm. So the Flatwood Monster today is more seen as a cryptid as opposed to an alien or an ET, a UFO occupant. But there was a UFO sighting before they found this thing. And it came down from the trees. It startled a family. Some dogs ended up dying. And supposedly where the craft landed or crashed, vegetation still has a hard time growing there decades later. Now,
wonder if soil samples had ever been taken.
There you go. And the Men in Black will come out and be like, So anyway, Flatwoods Monster. The newspapers are like, what are these backwoods people seeing out there? They're, the Flatwooders have gone crazy. And so it was a big joke. But all these clippings came into the IFSB. Gray Barker is super involved with the Flatwoods Monster. That's how he gets into this stuff. This is his into this community.
I think he's part of the same race as Mothman.
Maybe.
And they've come to warn people.
Could be. A lot of Bender stuff is warning about atomic weapons. Like, that's his anxiety. Barker sends a letter that Bender receives around November 20th, 1952, and Barker reveals that the local monster sighting he feels is connected to the flying saucers. So Barker tells Bender, and I think Bender really internalizes that, because as he interacts more with these creatures, he also starts seeing the Flatwood Monster in places. In the early months of 1953, Reverend S.L. Daw, a member of the IFSB, is promoted to a department that is investigating authenticities, because real early on they realize there is a spiritual aspect to these saucer sightings as well. So they want to get a preacher on board to talk to these people as well. After they have this meeting, Bender shows these people out of his house, and as he comes back into his room, he thinks somebody's in the room. He thinks, oh, well, somebody forgot something. They came back to get their hat or something. He runs in to see who it might be. His bedroom door is open, and he notices that there's that blue light again. And as he peered into the room, he noticed a glowing, ill-shaped form in the corner. He addresses the shape, and the shape begins to fade, but there are two glowing eye points that are the last to fade out, and the room smells like sulfur. The radio's on again. No frequency coming through. Shortly after this experience, Bender offered Barker the role of chief investigator at the International Flying Saucer Bureau. So it's like, you hang out with us and you go investigate everything. Barker accepts, and the International Flying Saucer Bureau has some cards printed up for him, lead investigator. Barker hands them out to three of his friends and then randomly a hitchhiker. A few days later, an FBI agent arrives at Barker's door, and the agent has Barker's business card and has questions for Barker about the type of establishment that the International Flying Saucer Bureau is. And Barker's like, where'd you get my card? And the agent says it came from an epileptic at the local hospital. And
why do they care?
That's so this is this a story that Barker made up of some FBI
like
agent showing up? And what is and this is Barker's footnote that he's talking about this. He's like, I gave it to three friends. None of them are epileptics. And the hitchhiker I gave it to was going to Florida because he just enlisted. Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, it was the hitchhiker. Dude. Mm-hmm. If they even had it, but why would they care? I don't. Are the FBI investigating every fanzine that is produced?
Are they investigating every piece of paper they find in a person's pocket.
Right. And then what does epileptic mean in 1953?
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
Anyway, Barker reaches out to the IFSB and is like, why would the FBI be asking me about what's going on? And we're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So this is, in this book, Bender makes this admission where he's like, sometimes I see connections where there aren't actually connections. Like, sometimes my mind jumps to conclusions. And I think that's interesting because I think we all do that.
Yeah.
He mentions that written on the back of this business card, there was a name and a Florida address, and Barker couldn't remember what they were, but Bender had been receiving letters from a new member of the IFSB from Florida who was saying some really crazy stuff, but still couldn't figure out how that person would have gotten the card or known who Gray Barker was at that point. So it's weird. And in all actuality, Barker could have just made it up,
Right.
So we don't know. The first investigation that the new IFSB department looks into were photographs taken by Mark Surilovic. Let's go with that.
Yeah, sure.
And that was on May 3rd, 1953, and it was over Lake Erie. He was taking pictures of the sunset. And when he had the pictures developed, he saw these giant discs in the picture. And so they get sent to the IFSB. The Department of Authentication looks at it, and they're like, you got lens flare here, So this is the first thing that Bender talks about in the book, and I think he's putting that in there to illustrate, like, look, we're not just looking at every picture and saying, that's a UFO. Like, he'd call it a flying saucer anyway.
Right.
So they are looking at these pictures from Mark over Lake Erie, and one of the people on that board, his last name is Lucchesi, and he's one of Bender's closest friends. But at some point, Lucchesi loses his file that has these pictures in it and the report. It is either misplaced or taken from him. And for some reason, it ends up with the New Jersey Police Department. And they call in Lucchesi to be like, tell us about this. What's going on? And he talks to him for like an hour, but then they're like, all right, here's your stuff back. See you later. Like, what are they doing? Are they just being... is it just cops being curious? And this is one of those things, it's always hard for me to think about these, because if I'm a cop and I open up a file and I see UFO pictures and then documents in it that say this isn't real, this is likely lens flare, I'm like, we're the cops, we can talk to this guy, call him in here, let's see what he has to say, this might be a good time,
Just for fun,
Just for fun, yeah. What a waste of resources. But
I mean, is there evidence that conversation happened at all?
First person.
Okay. There's not, like, nobody's got police records that they brought him in.
No. So you could see how, even if these things were imagined, you've got a report that one of your executive members has been brought into the police, and then your newly appointed director is visited by the FBI. May not be true, but Bender's interacting with ghosts out in the world, and that is adding to his worldview. So you can kind of see how that would raise people's suspicions, In the later half of 1953, George Adamski begins to contact the IFSB, and we've talked a little bit about George Adamski. He's got some great pictures. Popular figure in the early flying saucer movement, George Adamski. He's got several books out there.
Yeah, his stuff I found him to be really interesting. It sounds like good stories. I mean, he's met with a guy from Venus.
First time Adamski writes to the IFSB, it is to correct the story that Space Review has published about his contact with an entity that came from another planet. You got all this stuff wrong about my contact experience. Bender brings up the Air Force policy about UFOs. Donald Kehoe has some reports out, and Kehoe suggested that the Air Force was actually withholding information from the public. Some IFSB people agreed, and others, including Bender, apparently thought the Air Force likely knows as much as the IFSB does. Like, the amateurs know as much as the authorities at this point.
Yeah, but I think that we are operating with two different data sets.
Oh, of course.
If the conversation happened, everybody would know more.
Yes, yeah. But
and I use the term data set loosely.
Oh, yes, yeah. For some reason, with everybody in the IFSB, there's some people who are like, the Air Force knows more than they're telling us. And the other people are like, no, the Air Force knows as much as we do. And if somebody's like, well, let's just test them. They're doing a Freedom of Information Act request before the Freedom of Information Act exists. They write to the Air Force about 2 well-known cases reported in newspapers and are like, what extra info can you give us on this? For reference, the 2 high-profile cases. The first one is January 7th, 1948. This is shortly after Roswell. Roswell would be into June, beginning in July, 1947. So January 1948. There is a big object spotted over Fort Knox. Jets are scrambled to go look at it, and it is just zipping around and then flying slow over an airport. There are multiple witnesses. Everybody's calling in like, what is this giant thing floating out there? Sometimes it's floating, sometimes it's moving real fast. They scramble 3 jets, and Captain Thomas Mantell, he gets eyesight on it. He's like, this thing is huge. It's 1,000 feet long. It's going really fast. It's matching his speed, and he keeps pushing his plane further and further, and it rises in altitude, and so does he. And eventually, the other 2 planes lose sight of him. They don't know where he's gone, but he is radioing back in like, I've got contact. He's matching my speed. I'm raising altitude to match his altitude. And then at some point, there's no more radio contact, and his airplane goes to pieces in pursuit of this 1,000-foot object that all these people saw.
Does he survive?
No.
Oh.
Yep. There is a report that goes out that they phrase these in vague ways. Since they're not clear about it, that leaves it open to be like, well, they can't tell us that he was actually shot down by the UFO.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence that happened. It was some sort of malfunction, likely, but it's weird. So anyway, that's all the information that's available to the IFSB. The second is from July 1951, and it's a fella named Fred Reagan. He is flying his Piper Cub at 8,000 feet, and he sees a bright light in the distance, and he's like, what is that? But he doesn't have time to really think about it because it is coming straight toward him extremely fast. And so he turns right real hard to try to miss it, and it clips his tail. His plane starts going down. And then he is loosed from the wreckage as his plane is coming apart because its integrity is shot. Sees the engine fly out, and it's shooting down. And he's just watching his plane fall below him as he is slowing, he feels. But he's not wearing a parachute. He just fell out of his plane. And then he feels that he is being drawn up towards something. And as he turns to look, it's the object that just hit him. He is brought into that ship. And in and out of consciousness, he notices he's in a dark room and talks about all the things around him look like robotic asparagus.
Cool.
But think about that image you just saw, the Flatwoods Monster.
That's true.
If you were to slim that
shape,
figure down, the head.
Get skinnier and longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I like asparagus.
I do too.
You like what?
Asparagus.
Yeah, me too.
He also describes the interior of that room smelling like sulfur and ozone. He then awakens in a blue room and notices he is lying on something soft. And somehow he receives a message that his vehicle was hit by a ship belonging to beings representing another planet. His next impression was that he's in a hospital with human doctors and nurses. He was found next to his wreckage, unharmed, and people are just like, here's a plane in pieces, and here's the pilot. What's going on around here? They're extremely puzzled. This may be folklore, legend, but supposedly Fred Reagan, in the state of Georgia, he is in an asylum and passes from neural degeneration supposedly caused by atomic radiation. So we have interplanetary beings, the person's life was spared, the plane's wrecked, and then he ends up dead from radiation.
Was he exposed to radiation, like maybe during a war or any? Like, was he?
There's not a lot of info.
Anything?
Not a lot of info on him.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to look up. Is like
it's folklore.
How old he was and if it tracked. But there's a lot of Fred Reagans out there.
Yep.
So I don't know which one I'm looking for.
I'm guessing Georgia because supposedly he died in a Georgia hospital.
And there's one in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is not that far.
His passing was within a year of this experience. He had passed. So it was rapid degeneration.
Oh, I did not pick up on that part.
The Pentagon responded to their questions with a form letter, in the opinion of the IFSB. It was just like, anyone who writes asking about flying saucers, this is the letter they get back. It admits that 20% of sightings are unexplained, but that's mainly due to the data available. And the IFSB is like, why would they send this? Why wouldn't they even acknowledge our specific questions? So for the people who are like, they don't know anything, they didn't have anything to report, and the people who are like, they're hiding something, it's like, well, clearly they're hiding something. Like, well, both can be true. In July of 1953, Australia and New Zealand are in the midst of a flying saucer flap. While the Bureau reps could hardly keep up with reports, they ask the U.S. chapter for help. They're like, can we send you some of these things for you to help us catalog? They are looking for proof of extraterrestrials, while Bender and the IFSB was looking for a base on the continent of Antarctica. The IFSB is like, if they are extraterrestrials, they are coming here for something and they're going to have a base here. Like, where would it be? Antarctica. That's where it's got to be. The Australian and New Zealand people are not convinced they're going to find a base, but they're like, it's totally aliens, so we can team up on this a little bit. Their project looking into that, they lamely call Project X, but it's the 50s. The beginning...
Is that where X-Files came from?
It could potentially be. You talk about Mosley faking that. Mosley is a big character in this, but also there is a Scully character, Frank Scully, and that's where that X-Files name came from.
Interesting. So, okay.
It's like, these are real people.
Project X, X-Files. Yeah, maybe.
When that Project X is formed, that starts a harassment campaign for the Australian fella. His last name is Gerald. But people are knocking on his door early in the morning. And he's like, I'm not answering that door. Cars are slowly creeping by outside. Witnesses who see these cars camped out with 2 people in it. They're just dudes dressed in suits just hanging out in a car, but they've been there for 5 hours just sitting there. And apparently some witness who is not named walks up and tries to talk to him, but they just ask her, do you have the time? We talk about time a lot. It's common in encounters, questions about the time, or what is your time cycle? And I often think about how I'd answer that question. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year. And I think, that's a pretty good way to talk about time, in my opinion. In a book I'm reading not related to Men in Black, there is a contactee who talks about giving that answer. And the being's response was, that's not time, that's your passage around the sun. And it's like, so what is time, as we understand? It's a construct.
It is a construct.
Which is why I'm late all the time, because time's not real, It's not a good excuse, is it?
Did that show up on the...
If time isn't real, how can I be late?
Well, isn't it just a measurement tool?
Yeah. Just measurement. And I know all of our electronics are synced around here, but just because they all say the same time doesn't mean our wristwatch is going to say, depending on what kind of a wristwatch we have. But it's like 2 minutes, that's close enough. Come on. You disagree?
I'm so type A. Like, this whole thing is making me feel... It's giving me the creepy crawlies. Yeah. I'm getting the icks about how it's okay to be late because time is subjective. And I'm like, but other people exist.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the president of the Australian Bureau. July 22nd at 3 a.m., this is 1953. Car pulls up outside the Bureau and remains there until after 6:30 a.m. The car was heard to cruise past quietly between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., but then at 3 a.m. it just totally stops and just waits there. Around this same time, the New Zealand Bureau president is noticing spooky odors around his house that make his normally laid-back cat flip out. So we've got 2 places where strange things are happening. So that was just, there are these freaky things that are happening to both of these people that are strange. People are surveilling them. The paranoia is setting in. As Bender, he's not making a lot of progress with the flying saucer investigation. He pitches this idea that we're going to have a world contact day. Every International Flying Saucer Bureau member at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, we're all going to lay down and telepathically invite these beings to come and land and talk to us.
What year again?
1953. Now,
we're all going to drink the Kool-Aid.
Right.
At 3.
Right. And so half of the members are like, you have lost your mind. We're not doing that. 2 executives, when he pitches this idea, are like, absolutely not. They will think we've lost our mind. What do you guys think?
I think it would have been a good experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
I think, why not try it?
There you go, yeah.
What does it hurt?
What's it hurt?
Unless you're just too busy.
Yeah.
And then I guess that's your problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pushback was the people across the sea. Because what time did he want to do it at?
Yeah.
And then they're like, dude,
we're going to be
that's
sleeping
like
hard.
in the middle of the night for us.
Right.
Like, can you make it a little more convenient?
Bender does say that most of the executives are pro telepathic content. Like, let's try it. And so the naysayers are voted out. They're going to do it. C-Day, contact day, is set. The very next day, the 2 executives who oppose just resign. They're like, we're out. We're out and we want our money back. You guys have lost your mind.
I think there's an interesting thing here about credibility.
Mm-hmm.
That's, the UFO people think that the ESP people are less credible.
Right.
And the ESP people think the UFO people are less credible. And so there's this, and I'm using ESP because that's what they would have called it in the 50s.
Sure.
I suspect that's what they would have called it.
Extrasensory perception is what that stands for.
Yeah. So I've always thought this was fascinating because it is a real thing that exists in a lot of these communities.
Yeah.
And ties into religion as well.
Of course it does, yes.
Right? Like, it's, my religion is true, therefore your religion is false, even if they are saying the same thing.
Right. Oh, I agree with the lights in the sky thing, but I have my own version of what that means to me, and I joined this group thinking you would help me find my version, but you're not going to help me do that because you're going this different direction.
Right.
I don't like the message here. I'm going to go over here.
But the funny thing is, they're not, for as open-minded as they are, even knowing it's not going along what you think, they're just ruling out things.
Right.
So, like, it's just an experiment. Like, okay, and then if something happens, then it's, what do you say now? Mm-hmm. But
I have this theory
wouldn't you want to rule out certain things?
Sure.
I have this theory that the reason that they're rejecting it is because if it works, or even I guess if it doesn't, and other people find out they tried this kooky thing, then everything else that they have been saying becomes less credible.
Becomes kooky. Okay.
And so they want to do everything in a very scientific way, whatever that term means.
Well, in their guidelines.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if this thing feels like it's outside of science, then it undermines everything they've been doing. Mm-hmm. That's my theory about how they thought about it. I have no idea.
Sure. I'm sure that's an aspect of it.
Yeah.
You go in saying this is a scientific organization. You talk about scientific method. These are observable. These are reproducible. We can check each other's work on this. Mm-hmm. How do you check somebody's work on saying your prayer hard enough at 3:00 in the afternoon?
Right.
Yeah.
Although they were going around hoaxing each other all over the place anyway, so
this is true as well. Yeah. So, when word comes in that these 2 high-up executives have withdrawn their financial support and resigned, a whole bunch of other people get real excited and like, no, this is the direction we want to go. Take our money. So it becomes popular with a different crowd all of a sudden.
Interesting. Okay.
I am going to read you the special bulletin that was published.
Okay. It feels like this is turning culty.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm anticipating accurately.
Okay. On March 15th, 1953, all officers, representatives, and members are asked to participate in an experiment, something that has not yet been attempted by any other group such as ours. And I would like to amend, that he knows of.
Sure.
How would he know that?
Yeah.
Sure.
We will attempt to send a message to the occupants of the saucers, if they exist, by the use of mental telepathy. Each member will memorize the message on this form, and on the time designated will close his eyes in a quiet, secluded spot, lie down if possible, and repeat this message in his mind. Do not repeat vocally. If the saucer people are able to pick up mental telepathy, they will certainly be able to pick up a message that will be sent by hundreds of IFSB members. We may never know if this message has reached anyone, but if a sudden flurry of saucer sightings occur in 1953 or soon after our message, or even a saucer landing, we will know that we may have been indirectly responsible for it. Members must remember that, in order for mental telepathy to work, you must have nothing on your mind at the time you send the message. You must only think of the person or persons to whom you are sending the message, and repeat it over in your mind. You must not have troubles or worries of any kind in the back of your mind, as this will tend to distract. This experiment is not compulsory to anyone in the IFSB. We merely ask you to volunteer your services in trying to do so at the time designated, and not too soon before or after the time shown. We are sending this bulletin far enough in advance so that you may be sure to have your clocks set correctly that day and that the message has been memorized.
Can I just say that you, for a little while there, went into old-timey radio voice, and it was real fun. I liked where you were going. I was like, oh, now we're going to... It felt very... You know, like those films that they would play.
It's a special
about
bulletin.
The news. Yeah, exactly. So great.
Do you want to hear the message?
Okay, I was going to ask
if
he said what the message was.
Here's the message. Calling occupants of interplanetary craft. Calling occupants of Calling occupants of interplanetary craft that have been observing our planet Earth. We of IFSB wish to make contact with you. We are your friends and would like you to make an appearance here on Earth. Your presence before us will be welcomed with the utmost friendship. We will do all in our power to promote mutual understanding between your people and the people of Earth. Please come in peace and help us in our earthly problems. Please give us some sign that you have received our message. Be responsible for creating a miracle here on our planet to wake up the ignorant ones to reality. Let us hear from you. We are your friends. End message.
How boldly to assume that they know English.
Yeah, no kidding. Also, why do you think they want to help with their Earth's problems? They probably got their own problems.
What are the problems they want help with, do we think? Nuclear...
Benders is absolutely atomic weapons.
That's what I think, too.
Yeah.
That's what I think, too. Especially given the timing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then March 15th, we've got all the times. So we would have done it at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Britain, 11 p.m. France, 11 p.m. Australia, March 16th at 9 a.m. New Zealand, March 16th at 11 a.m. Canada, same as United States above.
Right.
So it wasn't as bad.
Nah. You gotta wake up by 9 o'clock if you're in Australia. You gotta stay up to repeat that thing 5 times or whatever if you're in Great Britain and France at 11. So, Bender takes part in C-Day. He goes into his room, turns out the lights, gets the atmosphere ready, lays down on the bed, and he says the message internally twice. As he finishes the internal recitation the 3rd time, he is struck by a massive headache. All around him there is blue flashing light, and a terrible odor is filling his nostrils. It's that sulfur smell again. It feels as though his eyes and temples are swelling and about to burst. He feels himself being lifted upwards. Suddenly the light stops flashing. He is apparently having an out-of-body experience because he can see himself lying in his bed. From the darkness beyond the bed, a message is given, and it is essentially a threat. Stop looking into UFOs. You're getting too close. We're watching, etc. And Bender's like, dudes, we want to be your friends, man. Why can't you help us save our planet?
I just want to take a ride, man.
He specifically mentions that his lips don't move, and the response is something like, we are on an assignment and we must not be interfered with. Leave us alone. Bender then experiences being dropped back into his body, and he notices a shadowy figure at the edge of his bed. As he makes a move, the figure fades, and Bender notices a yellow mist filling the room. As he continues to move, the mist dissipates, but his eyes continue to feel puffy. He still's got that sinus pressure headache. This is the moment where it occurs to Bender that he might be going crazy. He understands that this doesn't normally happen. But just in case he isn't, he wrote down his experience in a diary, and he sealed it, and he put it away in case anything should happen to him. Why would he think that? He doesn't elaborate on what he thinks might happen to him, but The sulfur smell stayed in his room for 2 days after the experience, and it was especially heavy in his bed sheets.
Because he's tooting all night.
Dude, he needs to lay off the eggs.
He's trying to blame aliens for his toots, and he just needs to own up to it. Everybody toots.
Should have just got a dog.
Yeah, that's a good way to absolve yourself of toot responsibility.
He found that his radio was on after that experience as well. And reading the book, it kind of seems like Bender is worried about these experiences. And he contemplates how people throughout history have had strange experiences, which they share, and then they are ridiculed, disbelieved by the public. And he considers himself a researcher. Becoming an experiencer himself has altered his perception. So Bender finally decides that he's going to write it up for Space Review. And he calls in 2 executives for the IFSB, and he tells them everything. And then he asks for their advice. He is immediately accused of making it up to get new subscribers. Like, you're making that up. I don't quite understand this, because these people are like, we were on board with you telepathically reaching out to the aliens, but like, you actually experiencing stuff, we're out. We're not buying. It seems like the same thing to me. You're not bored, right?
I'm just chilling, dude.
You're not talking much, Dustin.
I don't have anything to throw into this. I've never heard. I'm just fascinated by
this is a crazy story.
Yep.
I'm excited to get to the point where we take all this information, because so much of it, I keep interrupting you because I'm like, oh, but this feels like it contradicts with that. And this, do you know what I mean?
Yes. This is one of those things where this isn't an ET experience. This is a paranormal experience. This is the other.
Right.
It doesn't fit neatly into a category.
And that's where I'm like, ooh, that's the meat I want to get to.
At this point, Bender is essentially going to ignore his organization. He's like, this is my organization. If I want to do telepathy and talk to the aliens and speak about my experience, I think I should be able to. So he starts writing all this down, and for some reason, he's going to send this letter to the Pentagon. I am a modern person, and I think if I had some sort of encounter in my bedroom, my first thought is not write a letter to the Pentagon, right?
Well, especially if you think that
they might be the bad guys.
The men in black are perceived as government officials hiding things up. So if not everybody was thinking that, but the majority of people were.
But it's Bender that's talking about sending it to the government, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bender didn't think it was the government.
Right.
It's Barker that thinks it's
the
government. And so, and that, I know, I'm lost. I keep getting lost in that too. The names. But yeah, so to me, I do feel like maybe it's a cry for help.
Yeah, and he's not getting support from his buddies.
Right.
So he decides to write this letter, just in case. And he throws it in a lockbox so he can really think about it for a couple of days before he's like, I'm going to go full-on crazy person.
Good idea.
Yeah. So he decides, yep, I'm going to mail it. Goes to this lockbox, opens it up. Letter's not in there. But there's a smell coming from it. What's it smell like?
Farts.
Oh my god, it smells like rotten eggs.
Sulfur. Also, the radio is on. Bender now is like, he is concerned. He might be losing his grip. He's got this fear of sharing this stuff because he's worried they're going to commit him.
Wait.
Yeah.
So Bender is now at the place where, whether he's saying it or not, at the time period, he is now worried that society is going to react badly if he continues to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Also, his buddies have told him the same thing. His friends
have said people are going to react badly if you continue to talk about this.
They are saying, you're making that up.
So, is it possible that he decided it would be easier to make up a story about them telling him not to talk about it?
Of course.
Okay.
We just listened to a podcast where some dude faked his death on Reddit, to get out of something.
Sure, that happens. That happens a lot. People are not, they're not good. Okay.
So he's only told 2 other people of his experience, and he's told them that he intends to write a letter. So As he's thinking about supernatural reasons, even though he smells sulfur and the radio was on, it could be that one of his buddies came in and swiped his letter.
Okay.
He doesn't rule out that possibility. It also
sounds like it's a ghost of a teenager.
Yeah.
Listen to tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Farting in his bed.
Yeah.
Yep. Not turning off stuff when they leave the room.
Not turning the lights off. Lava lamp.
Mm-hmm. So Bender goes on vacation for 2 weeks. And when he gets back, he opens his door for the first time, and it smells stale. Not a lot of air movement in there, but he also smells sulfur. He opens all the windows. Everything seems to be in order. But then he notices the radio's on. That night he gets ready for bed, and he walks into the room, and he gets that not quite right feeling. Blue lights begin to swirl all around the room as his sinus headache comes back. He makes it to his bed and becomes very cold. And then he feels he is no longer in control. The room is darkened, but he could make out 3 shadowy figures floating off the floor. Bender's temples are throbbing, and he describes the feeling of being bodily cleansed somehow.
I just had a thought.
Yeah.
I need to look it up, so keep going.
Oh, okay. Then, after this cleansing process, he can make out these shadows. They become more like figures, more like physical objects. They look like clergymen. They are dressed in black. They wore Hamburg-style hats. They partially obscured their already hard-to-see faces. Bender describes no longer feeling any fear, like the feeling had been removed from his body. Maybe it was part of that cleansing process. Suddenly, the eyes of the figures lit up like flashbulbs and focused directly on Bender. So they flash to light and then continue to look at him with that light. The pain above his eyes becomes unbearable, and he receives a message that he interprets something along the lines of, "Leave us alone. We're very busy. We don't really look like this, but we take this form to scare people away. You are nobody, but you like to write. We're going to tell you everything and be satisfied because no one believes you anyway. Our names are meaningless to you, so you can just call us 1, 2, and 3, and we'll respond. Also, we take humans and use them to look more like you if we have to. We've scared some people so bad that they've died. You'll see us again." And then they give Bender a piece of metal, like a little token, and he's like, "You can contact us with this." To make contact, he would hold the metal in his palm. He would close his eyes and repeat, "Kazakh," and turn on his radio. Kazakh, 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 over and over again. Before they left, the entities requested that he contact them in 2 days at this same time. As he is receiving the message, one of the entities fiddles with his radio and said, "This will help us return to our base." And when the figures left and Bender's sensation returned, he felt the piece of metal clutched in his hand, and he instantly gets up and puts it in his lockbox. Why would he still trust that lockbox if his letter disappeared in there? Why would he keep using it, do you think?
Yeah.
But he does, anyway. He's determined he's going to use this piece of metal. He's going to take this piece of metal and show it to his buddies and be like, "Look, the aliens gave me this." Now, I would not be swayed by that if you brought me a token and you said, "Space aliens gave this to me," and you showed it to me. Like, cool.
So you were talking about his headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me that my father has migraines that are purely auras. So they're essentially hallucinogenic.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have the headaches. But there are people who have migraines with auras. So they get the headache and the hallucinogenic aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to look to see if auras included smells.
Mm-hmm.
And they do. So it's visual auras, which often appear like lights, a hallucination of a smell that isn't really there, and paranoia.
Yeah.
Because, and I looked it up, there's science, we'll stick it in the show notes, but it's basically, it talks about how like the same dopamine receptors go off with psychotic disorders that go off with migraine.
Sure.
It's not a particularly common
thing.
So please don't think I'm sitting here saying everybody who has migraines is psychotic.
Right. Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But it is a thing that happens in some people, And the research that I'm looking at is claiming that it's a very new discovery. I mean, this is from May of this year. So it does kind of make me wonder if maybe he was prone to migraines.
After reading this is what I think as well.
Oh, really?
I just have suspicion. You've got the science.
I try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. If you are having this experience, it feels real to you. How do you anchor it to reality and make your friends understand what you're experiencing?
Well, and that's the thing. It's like everything that you're saying makes me think that, yes, he's having this experience with the headaches and everything else, but his friends are encouraging him to believe that this other thing is happening. No, they maybe don't know about the blue lights and the headaches and whatever, but he's having this very strange experience that maybe is a migraine. And he's got people in his ear talking about, like, don't talk about this anymore.
If he's already prone to paranoia.
Right, exactly. And so, of course, I would mesh these things together.
Mm-hmm. His book is a battle of trying to be like, am I going crazy?
And none of this, to me, is to say that, like, the UFO stuff didn't happen.
Sure.
Right? Like, I am specifically only talking about
his specific experience here.
His, quote, Men in Black experience. And I am very informed by Barker's influence on him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from on this.
I think it's weird that say that is a migraine issue that obviously they didn't know about back in the day. But I think, what are the odds of that person having them along with all the studying he's been doing, the research he's been doing? What's the odds of that guy having that rare migrainal issue? So,
but are other
then it's like,
are
okay,
other
well,
people
is
talking
it
about the blue lights and all of that stuff?
In other paranormal things, blue light is common.
Well, ghosts. We talked about ghosts. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. That's
and those guys in the dune, it could have been blue, but green's close to blue.
They didn't have the color blue at that time period, did they? Blue didn't exist then.
There's an incredible children's book about the history of blue. I think it's just called Blue. But I think you would really like reading it. It's like, it's a picture book. So it's beautiful illustrations, and it's really cool. Totally unrelated to this podcast.
What was, this is way off subject, the bush that was on fire in the Bible, wasn't it Moses that saw that?
That's the Moses story.
Did it say anything about color? I don't remember.
It was...
Or was it just a flame?
It was a flame, but not consumed by it. So... The bush was a flame, but not
so he never
consumed
describes
by fire.
color or anything.
Not a color. I'm trying to think of the movie, which the Ten Commandments is better than the book. Yul Brynner, Charlton Heston. Moses goes up and sees that burning bush, and he comes back a changed man.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the Bible, the book?
The movie... Book. The movie by Cecil B. DeMille,
yes.
I am claiming is better than the Book of Exodus. Yes.
Well, the story of Moses is like 2 paragraphs long.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Like a 4-hour movie.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
No more Shakespeare in schools. When you get to the Old Testament, just watch the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
Tyler, you got a lot of hot takes, bud.
Okay. So, Dustin and I have talked about Apple and the big breakthrough. The big breakthrough is John Keel's paranoia stuff. And he is talking to this gal who is in contact with 2 people who would be considered men in black. They're men in black types. But there are women involved. But they give her this token, keep this nearby.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But that's 20 years later. Oh, well.
Yeah.
20 years after the experience, 10 years after the publishing of this book.
But Keel more than likely would have read this book.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
anyway. So what is it with those trinkets? Is that a fairy thing, Sarah? Do fairies give you trinkets to contact them again?
The one thing that I do know is, like, fairies do like to give you things, but they are not the things that you think they are. So, if his trinket disappeared, that's a very fairy thing.
It's going to disappear.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, that's a very fairy thing. Or they'll give you gold and it turns into we talked about this, leaves and sticks and stuff.
Yeah.
Or just flat out just disappears. It's just not there anymore.
Yeah. Or take your baby and leave a wooden log.
Yeah, they'll do that too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I don't know about to contact them.
Okay. But anyway, he's got this piece of metal in his hand and he's like, great, I'm going to go throw this in my lockbox right now. Throws it in the lockbox. And then he thinks to himself, if these all-powerful beings that can manifest themselves in my room could read my thoughts, they know what I'm going to do with that metal. Mm-hmm. And so he goes back to check, and it's not in the box where he put it. And, of course, the box smells like sulfur. When the piece of metal wasn't in there, even though he could smell the sulfur, he's still like, well, that was all a dream. I never had the piece of metal and all that stuff. Just for fun, on day number 2, he checks the box, and it's there. And it is glowing slightly. It is slightly illuminated. It wasn't there in the morning, but it's returned in the evening. And he's surprised by it. And he picks it up, and the thought again occurs to him, show my friends. But it becomes extremely hot to hold. And it becomes so hot that he drops it. It started to glow red, but then when he drops it, it hits the ground and returns to its normal color. So he's like, well, clearly I'm not supposed to do that. I'm not going to be able to hold this if I'm going to go show it off. And like I said, what a silly thing to show someone, to be like, I've been talking to aliens.
Yeah.
So he's got the metal. He holds it, and he turns on the radio and starts repeating Kazakh or whatever it is that he's supposed to say. That ache in his head comes back, and he gets into bed, and he perceives the sensation of leaving his body. And the next time he is able to see, he finds himself viewing a large, is it dais?
Dais.
Dais?
D-A-I-S.
Uh-huh.
Dais.
What is a dais?
It's like a platform.
Okay. Bender's awareness, he wakes up in a place where there is a large
dais
in front of him. He believes that he is on a saucer that is landed somewhere on Earth. And above the dais is a giant dome. And above the dome, he can see out and he can see stars. So he thinks he's still on Earth. He's seated in a metal chair, and it's made of the same metal as the rest of the area that he's in. Suddenly, everything goes dark, and slowly a blue light begins glowing brighter and brighter, and then a panel slides open on a wall, and a person steps out onto the dais.
I'm not 100% sure I'm pronouncing it correctly now. It's one of those, I may have only ever read it.
I've only ever read it. He begins to speak with Bender, though his lips do not move. The being welcomes Bender to their domain, which no human has ever been before, and they are here to harvest an essential nutrient from Earth's salt water. They do this in cycles when the spin of the universe brings our solar systems back around and in range. These beings have watched our solar system for a long time. Earth wasn't always populated, where our neighboring planets have had life come and go. Earth's atmosphere will continue to change, and we will have to adapt to breathing minimal oxygen. Earth's closest neighbor had a vast civilization that was wiped out by marauders when their solar system whipped around right next to ours. The marauder cycle is slower than the being cycle, and the being cycle laps Earth several times, apparently. They're relating to Bender that they are hastily wrapping operations up because their cycle's about to end. So this is an interesting thing that Bender is getting, because if he is just starting to collect the data now, he may be seeing moments of this, but when you look back through a lot of UFO data, it does come in cycles, and it's about every 7 years.
Interesting.
Yeah. But what this data is anecdotal, self-reported data. And if you saw a light in the sky going home tonight, who are you going to report that to? So number 1, it's people who are looking. Number 2, it's people who see it. Number 3, it's people who see it and report it. Mm-hmm. But those types of things tend to go in 7 to 10 year cycles. There's this tube in the middle of the dais that kind of becomes a 3D movie screen. And somehow Bender is watching the images, but also feels like he is part of the images and part of the tube itself, so it's very dreamy what's going on here. The tube displays images of the Pentagon, and the being says that his people have infiltrated all-powerful human organizations so that they can be aware of our plans. They do their best to remain hidden, and they want nothing to do with us. Suddenly, the image on the tube flips to the most hideous monster Bender has ever seen. And the person entity has slipped from that visage into the image on the screen, and now that being is the projected monster that's up there right now. And this monster is the Flatwoods monster. That is its representation. The monster now speaks from its mind and says, "Now you see me as I truly am. You find me hideous, but my people found your people very curious when you first crawled out of the sea. The being warned that if we keep fiddling around with radioactive stuff, we're going to lose the ability to reproduce. He encourages humanity to step up and face its challenges, though the being's interests are mostly just academic curiosity, nothing more." He was like, "Y'all do what you want. It makes no difference to us. We can get what we need with or without you, but y'all should shape up," which I think is interesting. The being tells Bender that there are male and female on their planet with similar function to human male and female. However, their females produce eggs that are stored, and they're only allowed to be hatched after the Great Blackening comes around and leads to significant loss of life on their planet. But apparently it's some cycle where there's a lot of death, and then they allow the eggs to hatch. There is also a third gender that is not male or female, and these beings are very rare. Their births are celebrated, and these genderless beings become the exalted ones.
That's cool.
Yeah, very interesting. Bender wanted to know more, but the tube faded to a blue glow, and the being came back into human form outside of the tube. The room went dark, and Bender's headache returned. He felt himself floating on a cloud in space. It ends, and he finds himself, he's in bed. He looks at his clock, and only 30 minutes has passed. He feels like he spent hours there, but it's only been 30 minutes. He rushes to the phone and calls his best friend, who's also a member of the IFSB Executive Committee, and his friend is like, "Al, you gotta stop making this stuff up, dude," and just hangs up on him. I'm like, don't want to talk to you.
No, they've had enough of his shit.
So, Bender, with the alienation of his actual friends, Bender starts to look forward to the other experiences, talking to these other people, learning whatever they had to say.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yeah.
So you asked about fairy gifts. There is a thing where if a fairy gives you a gift, and we talked about this before with the buckwheat cakes, if a fairy gives you a gift and you tell somebody about it, it goes away, it disappears. And so I'm wondering if that's connected to the coin, right? Like he was going to tell somebody about it, so it got hot.
This story is fairy stuff to me.
For sure. For sure.
Everything's fairy.
It's all fairies. I have an agenda on this podcast.
Okay.
I'm the only one here, I think, with an agenda, but it's all fairies.
So his alienation is going to have to be dealt with. He decides not to publish his experiences, and since he believed what the being told him, the flying saucers are no longer a mystery, and therefore he doesn't need to investigate anymore. So just shut all this down. I know the reason. They're coming here for something in our water. They're not messing with us. They just need their stuff and they'll leave. They're going to come back, but they're just here for a little bit. When asked, Bender would say, "It's not a secret to me anymore, so there's no need for my bureau to exist." Also, he starts being vague, like, "A higher power has told me to stop writing about it," because he views these beings as a higher power. So the IFSB decides to stop accepting memberships and start issuing refunds to current members. That October Space Review, please be careful about flying saucers, you know, that runs. August 1953, before the last issue. Bender again makes contact with the beings. He was in his room in the evening. He's editing a copy for Space Review. He thinks he hears a floorboard squeak in the attic, so he goes to investigate. The attic door is shut. For some reason, Bender kneels down next to the closed door and begins to smell sulfur. And so he's just expecting immediately there's going to be a visit. He stands at the door as the odor increases and finally works up the courage to open it. Opening the door, there's a man in black. He is extremely close. It's the movie theater guy. He is very sure this is the guy he saw in the movie theater. Bright glowing eyes. The being comes into the room, so Bender moves, and they are maintaining eye contact. And that backs him further into the room, and then immediately following the first guy come two more right after him, look the same way, eyes glowing. The two that follow are just looking around. They're not looking at him, they're looking at all the stuff in his room, but their eyes are glowing.
You said they're in a room? When did they come out of the attic?
I don't understand the floor plan, but I think the attic is he is in the attic. I think his room is the attic.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the way it goes anyway. The men were dressed in black, like a clergyman. Black hat, black shirt, black tie, all well pressed and almost new. Their eyes shined like flashlights, and their teeth were pearly white, set in a dark complexion. Black gloves hid their hands, and they had a blue glow all about their person. The first one says, "We're here to accompany you on a very important journey. You're going to tour our Earth base." And the three beings surround him, floating, eyes glowing, and they put their hands on his shoulders, and Bender feels as though the hands are dry ice. They're just extremely cold. And suddenly he finds himself in a large cavern with the three men. They were all standing on a shiny metal platform. The entire ceiling was made of ice, and bright light from the sun is throughout the cavern. There's also a bright beam of light that is shining on them from a source directly in front of them. Bender thinks that it must have taken a huge amount of heat to melt the interior of this ice cavern. So when he is transported here, Bender is like, this is the Antarctic base that I've been looking for. And it's artificial. It's been made by these critters. The beings indicated that Bender should follow them, and a shiny metal path is laid out. It leads into an underground tunnel that eventually led out into another dome area, and there are all these electrical panels and projection screens. Kind of looks like a radar. And Bender's descriptions don't make a lot of sense, but from somewhere, a flying saucer comes into this cavern and goes like it's making a landing. He's like, it is 10 feet away from me. It is right there. I can almost touch it. And it moves on. So, flying saucers coming in and out of here. Then Bender is taken to a large hangar, and in the hangar is a rocket that looks like you'd expect a rocket to look, but it is huge. It's the size of a battleship. The three beings escort him aboard and into an enormous lab, and there's machines everywhere, glass tubes, and there's this clear liquid that's being pumped through them, and a being that Bender assumes is in charge is standing in its hideous natural form at one end of the lab. The form is the size of an average human, but the being's eyes also glow. So this is a flatwood monster standing in the lab, distilling seawater. Bender's escorted to another area of the giant rocket. The flying saucer that he witnessed entering earlier was discharging seawater in this area, and he could not believe how huge the parking was, because it was just full of saucers. Just this hangar full of saucers all the way down. And then he's thinking about who flies these things. There must be so many people here at this base. From watching the UFO discharge this water, he is taken back into the lab to be left with this monster. He's able to witness the seawater process, but he's not really learning anything. They're just showing him how it works, what they're doing. Soon the three men return and they escort him through more of the ship. He's not sure what he's seeing. And soon he is brought into a room full of panels, displays, and buttons. A 9-foot-tall man dressed in gold fiddles with the machines, but he has a dark complexion, but very light hair. Bender assumes that this is an exalted one, and the entity likely runs the entire operation. Apparently he guesses right. The large, handsome figure approaches, and Bender's escorts bows, so Bender does too. What are you supposed to do? Bender also noticed that the three men had a piece of metal like his, and each one takes it and places it to the forehead of the big guy, and they indicate that he should do that as well, so he does. And then they all have a seat. Without moving their lips, they have this long conversation. He's welcomed. They tell him, you're not a threat. your efforts that you've been trying to use to contact us are useless. Stop trying to use telepathy.
Or did it work? Because he's there.
He was then told that no one will believe his story. So go ahead and ask whatever questions you want. We'll be completely truthful with you. Nobody's going to believe you. We'll tell you whatever you want to know. So he rapid-fired some questions. How long have you been here? At this time, they say we've been here since 1945. What's your purpose? They're trying to get this thing out of the seawater. Why? They say, we can't tell you, but we've shown you the process. He says, how long do you intend to stay? They say 15 years. And says, do you make trips back and forth to your home? And he says, the crews change out every 2 years. Bender says, do you intend to cause harm to our people? They respond, we have found it necessary to frighten many. Some humans have been taken to our home planet for study. We keep many organisms, but some do not survive. These we preserve. Humans do not survive. So this is abduction as well. Bender asks questions about his own...
murder by neglect.
Murder by neglect. Mm-hmm. Bender asks questions about his own safety and is apparently satisfied with the responses. They're like, we don't care. We just don't care. Bender then asks some questions about the universe, and this is where things get really interesting. There's a great mass of energy in the universe, and that's what everything comes from. It's always growing, even though it randomly spins off planetary systems. This is why everything in the universe spins. Some are spun off in a way that collides with other systems, and both are destroyed. Some systems take an extremely long, violent time before finally settling into a comfortable spin. The being discusses that even though they have excellent capabilities, they have never been able to find where the edge of the universe is. Bender has an illustration to show the spirit of the concept, and I'll have to upload a picture. But it's like there's this big sun in the center, and that's where these systems are spinning off from, and they spin way out. And eventually there's a spot to where it's like, this is the dark edge. We haven't been out here, and we keep losing ships. They send their scouts, and they don't come back from these. And then they assume it keeps going out from there. They talk about how violent the planetary process is. They talk about some of Earth's formation, and this is before we've been to the moon, so I don't know the history of Earth science. But they talk about the moon being a chunk that was split off from the Earth. I know that's a theory that's talked about. I don't know when that theory was popularized. But while the Earth was still hot, the moon was thrown off, and then finally when the Earth cooled, the moon was able to settle into an orbit. It's interesting. He talks a lot about evolution as well, but evolution would be a popular concept at this time. Mm-hmm. Scope's trial was 40 years before that, something like that. They don't believe in God because they can see how the universe is made. They watch it. But Bender's like, isn't that mass in the center that spins off, isn't that your creator then? Like, not in the way you understand it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So are they taking something out of the water?
Yeah.
So it's not salt.
It's not, probably not
and it's
salt.
not water itself.
Mm-mm. It's something.
Or we would have lost. But
if this is happening
back in the day, back in my day,
yeah,
the Earth was covered more. Like, we've lost water because, you know, you got continents now that show.
Well, there's this other theory they talk about with the Ice Age, especially with ice forming too much on the sides. Like, that can actually alter the spin of the Earth and cause... Look, at some point we're going to have to talk about a book called... There's a book called When the Sky Fell by Rand Flamath, and it's his wife. I want to say Ruth Ann something. Flamath is the last name. When the Sky Fell. And it's talking about all of these folkloric stories about the sun able to stand still in the sky. Like, you hear that in biblical stories and other stories. And usually it's standing still when there's a cataclysm happening. Well, looking at all this folklore, they've decided it wasn't that the sun was standing still, it's that the continent they were on was hauling ass across the surface of the planet because something happened and that caused the split. And so the continent is moving as fast as the sun is, as we are rotating around the sun.
I've been thinking about them taking stuff out of water. And so I had, of course, go down the rabbit hole and try to figure it out. I'm not a science person, so this is not going to be right. But this is a time period where people are thinking a lot about atomic bombs and the hydrogen bomb, with my air quotes, invisible air quotes. And I'm wondering if part of the mythology around them removing stuff from the water is a misunderstanding of how the hydrogen bomb was created.
Yeah. So his mindset is, that's on everybody's mind.
That's on everyone's mind. It's clearly on his mind in multiple, there are multiple bits of evidence that that's something he's very worried about.
Right.
I don't know. I'm kind of drawing a connection there.
Sure. So they have this talk. He gets really existential and philosophy heavy. Do you want to hear any of this philosophy stuff from the exalted being?
Oh, from the exalted being. Sure.
This is Bender asking the being. Since you have explored so much of space and the bodies that are now about us, I would like to know if there is life on any of our other planets in our solar system.
Good question.
The Exalted One said, it was mentioned to you previously that at one time, people existed on the planet you call the Red Planet, or Mars. They were destroyed by people from a passing planet similar to ours. They were exploited and ravaged by these visitors. The other planet nearest you, called Venus, is covered in shroud because it is going through a prehistoric stage similar to the one your planet experienced so many years ago. Life is just developing there. Whether it will be like that of your Earth, we do not know, but it has similar characteristics to life in your early evolution. Bender says, any signs on Mars that life did exist? He responds, yes, there are ruined cities which are masterpieces of architecture and the remains of a vast system of waterways that were mainly used for travel. When destroyed, the people there did not employ air travel, neither had they developed a technology to equal your present state of progress. Bender says, many things you have told me are similar to some of what our astronomers and scientists have surmised. Are they correct in most of their assumptions? The being says, you have many wise men and women on your planet, and they could go to great lengths with their intelligence if they would make use of it in a peaceful way, without trying to destroy each other with horrible weapons.
Sorry.
Is this so boring?
No.
We just witnessed something.
Yeah.
Oh, what was it?
A fly
Crawled in your straw?
climbed down the straw into his drink while you were talking.
Well, that's clearly a message.
Yeah, and so...
A message of him getting out of my tea.
So it was very distracting. I apologize, Tyler. It's not that you're not interesting. It was that something really wild was happening right in front of us.
It's going to gross you out, but I'm still drinking it.
I have no judgment. There's no judgment here.
What you're saying is interesting, but I just happened to look over and there was a fly and he started crawling down my straw.
He just went...
And he was right here, so I thought if I did this that he would fly up, but instead he decided to go down the rabbit hole.
Wow.
Doubled down.
Yeah, he doubled down on me. Bastard. Okay, so, yeah, sorry, Tyler. My bad.
Bender says, are there any other inhabited planets in our system? The being responds, you are the sole planet with human life in your solar system. Bender says, could a person from Earth survive on any of the other planets in our solar system? He says, no, not without special equipment. Bender says, do you think we will ever reach our moon or Mars or Venus? The being says, yes, you will reach your moon, but it holds great disappointments for members of your races. Bender says, is the moon rich in minerals that we might use here on Earth? And the being says, yes, it's very rich. And I might add that unknown to many of your people, there is moisture in many of the craters of the moon. And he says, what caused the craters? The being states, most of them were caused by a cooling down process when the moon was thrown from the Earth itself, but some of them were caused by large meteors which hit the face of the moon when another solar system was thrown from the central body at the same time your system was born. Bender says, do you believe in God? The Exalted One says, that is a creation of your people on Earth. You have strange races and colors in your people, and many languages are spoken, but it seems that all your peoples have had the desire to worship something during their evolution. They, growing like small children, wanted to have an anthropomorphized idea to cling to. Their belief was so great that in some cases, miracles seemed to have been created. These were written down for others to read, but these stories were told over and over until they are now considered to be true. Bender says, what about Jesus Christ here on Earth? The being says, a great believer in the God with miraculous attributions of great exaggeration. He could not save himself from death, and even his own race did not believe him, yet they worshipped the same God. Bender says, do you not have a God on your own planet, and do you worship anything? The being says, we do not worship anything, but we all know that the great central body created all of us and cast us off into space to form a life or to remain a barren piece of matter floating about. Bender says, what about Jesus Christ ascending into heaven?
He's just not giving that up, is he?
Could not find his body. The being says, we have studied all these things of your planet and have often thought how primitive your people appear to be. They are easily convinced of anything. They can be led by anyone who can turn their loves or hatreds in directions so desired by their leaders. Yours is a vulnerable people. As long as somebody leads them, they feel safe. On our planet, every person is independent and his own leader. Some may be superior in intellect, but they are merely respected and do not become leaders.
Then what is he?
In the case of your religious leader, Jesus Christ, the wisest man of all, was not the religious leader himself, but the person who devised the idea to hide away or destroy his body, so that for centuries afterward people would benefit from the celebration of the birth and death of this prophet. It is best to leave many things unsaid in the area of your religions, for it is a topic which causes great upheaval on your planet.
I mean, valid.
Mm-hmm. Bender says, is there a life after death? The being says, on our planet, there is no life once the body is destroyed, but we are fortunate in having lifespans 5 times your own. Some live even longer, but they are the gifted ones. We have no disease on our planet, but the thing which causes many to die is the great blackness that covers our planet when we pass a certain cluster of celestial bodies on our own trip around the great central body.
So they freeze to death.
This has been our reason for living underground and sealing all surface openings against penetration of a strong gas which troubles us at such times. How do you account for the apparitions and ghosts that people claim to see? The Exalted One says, it will surprise you to learn that beneath the surface of your planet, far down in cavernous cities, live creatures that are able to make themselves invisible when they come to the surface. They roam the surface of your planet quite frequently and like to cause fright to cover their stealing of certain things which they take back with them.
Interesting.
This Bender says, what would you say is the cause of the dreaded disease of cancer we have on Earth? And the being responds, the advent of your gasoline-propelled vehicles is a main factor. Bender says, will there ever be a cure? The being says, yes, your learned men will develop a cure. And then Bender's like, well, what's going on your planet? And they're like, oh, well, let us show you. And so they light up the tube again. And he says, the first frame, you will see a view of the surface of our planet in one particular area. If you watch closely, you will see how the elevated landing fields come up from below with massive towers and elevator shafts. Many of our cities are not connected by underground passageways, and therefore major travel is carried out on the surface by small craft. Goes through a whole bunch of these frames. Here is a picture of...
oh, the platforms.
The platforms.
Oh, yeah.
But this was sold as a science fiction cover to the Saucerian.
You have to upload that.
There was never a story. This looks
I'm
a lot...
making a list of stuff to upload.
Good
this
deal.
looks quite phallic.
It does.
Giving off Disney vibes.
Yep, that's Little Mermaid all over it.
You know, that guy never once asked about dinosaurs. Never once.
We didn't know
That's
about dinosaurs
disappointing.
in the 50s.
Come on.
We knew about dinosaurs in the 50s.
Nobody wants to know where that came from.
Yeah. Some contactee experiences the dinosaurs were the smart ones. It's strange. The reptilian race is strange.
This guy acts like several planets have had life in different forms, but in cycles loses that, and then it starts over. Yep. Kind of like what he said about Mars or Venus, as he said. Venus
is just getting started.
Is just getting started, right? So it's kind of starting the same way almost. So Earth at one time had different beings.
Sure.
And then got wiped out. Where dinosaurs...
Yeah. Absolutely.
A being, and then got wiped out, and then we started over again. Weird.
So if you want to think about
we're like dinosaurs.
Yeah. Waiting for that comet, man. When you think about Göbekli Tepe, the dinosaurs built that to have a message for humans.
They built what again?
Göbekli Tepe. Do you know anything about that?
I know about Laffy Taffy.
It's very similar. I got to finish this.
Yeah, you got to finish. I'm sorry, we're getting sidetracked here.
Okay, so Bender is like, you got to give me something physical, so I know this isn't a dream. And they're like, okay, we'll give you a sign. Like, what can I look for? You'll know it when you see it. What are you going to do? We'll destroy something of very little value to demonstrate our power. And Bender's like, okay. So he makes it back to his home. He feels the whole floating on a cloud business and all that. Makes it back. Wakes up in his bed. Goes to work. A couple days go by. Well, then there's a newspaper article. A couple of towns over, there is a streak in the sky, an explosion, and some sort of projectile is shot through a billboard. And there are all these witnesses of this streak of light in the sky, and something tears a hole through a billboard.
And they didn't find what it was?
They did not find what went through the billboard.
It was a DeLorean.
It could have very well been. Yes, of course. So the IFSB sends investigators out to look at this thing, because here's a light in the sky. Here is damage to a billboard. And it doesn't look like explosives have been used. There's no charring on it. But on the backside where there's some metal, there are some chunks of something else that they pull off. And several bureaus collect this stuff and send it off to labs. And it comes back that it's some sort of copper and copper nitrate. So it's common, but not usually in the manufacture of billboards. And so Bender is under the impression that they fired an energy weapon that went through something else that then deposited that residue onto the sign, which I think is overly complicated.
Yeah.
I would think
if
it were an energy an energy weapon and it went through, it's like maybe it broke things down to their purest element. Then that's stretching it too.
Yeah.
You know, but there was copper on the back of this billboard. And there's a picture of investigators standing next to it. It's like, you know, a 3-foot hole just blown through a billboard. He just reads the newspaper article and he's like, that's it. That's my sign. Also, a woman who heard the explosion and went out and saw the sign still smoldering, she smelled an odor in the air. What did it smell like?
Apples.
Farts.
Sulfur. So a couple of Bender's buddies haven't heard from him in a while, and they call to invite themselves over. And it's two of his best friends with the bureau. You know, he's like, oh, and it's like the day after he's had this strange experience. And he's like, okay, yeah, come on over. That'll be all right. And he starts to get worried because, you know, they've told him, don't talk about this stuff. We can injure you, and we don't want to frighten you, you know, but we may have to. He's worried he's going to slip up, but he's too nice to say, no, don't come over. But he is panicking after he gets off the phone. And then time goes by and his friends don't show up. But then his phone rings again and it's like, we're having car trouble, so we're just going to turn around. And he's like, oh, was that the beings helping me out? So he is seeing these connections. With memberships continuing to decline and people requesting refunds, they're like, Bender, you just need to write a science magazine and leave all the saucer stuff out. And he was like, sure. saucer mystery solved for me. No more mystery, so I'm moving on. October was that last issue of Space Review, and Bender puts in that statement, anyone interested in flying saucers are advised to be very careful. Well, he has this note that says flying saucer mystery solved, but then doesn't elaborate. If he were to elaborate, here's what I would like to think he would have written. My peers believe agents got to me. I'm going to let them think that. But really, it's because I've been harassed by spirits who became physical, and essentially, they're the flying saucer pilots. And they look hideous, but can take a more human form. They're processing seawater through some sort of distillation process in their giant lab that's in a giant rocket that's in a giant artificial cavern of ice and earth on Antarctica. The flying saucers are packed in the giant hangar that exists on the rocket. The saucers collect water and discard the parts they don't need. I know all this because I've seen it, and it has been communicated to me telepathically. Also, they view time differently, and only after a great culling event, the Great Blackness, do they, as a society, allow females' eggs to hatch. Oh, there's also a third gender, which is neither male or female, and those individuals come to be the exalted ones. The exalted ones are tall, tan, toned, and handsome. I touch the being's forehead with this piece of metal. Also, this metal, it's how I contact them. As long as there's a radio nearby that's on, but tuned to empty space, that makes it easier for them to come see me. Heads up, they use sulfur as aftershave. I think that would have been a great closing article to Flying Saucer, or to Space Review. So, obviously, he doesn't say any of that. Instead, he says it's no longer a mystery, but we can't tell you about it. And we're going to write it up, but a higher authority told us not to. And then we advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious.
Interesting.
So that last issue goes out at the beginning of October 1953. October 3rd, 10 p.m., Bender is visited by the three men. The sulfur smell is the first clue. He's not scared of them any longer, but his head sure does hurt above his eyes when they communicate. They tell him that two friends will visit and they have good intentions, but you may not tell them anything, confuse them as much as possible. Bender had already mentioned the three men, but he followed the being's instructions and probably left his two friends extremely confused. These were the two friends who finally came, after fixing up their car, they came back, but they just came unannounced. So he talks to his buddies, and it's weird. One of his buddies is like, I have to go to the bathroom. Like, oh, I took a laxative on my way here. Like, literally, the friend says, I took a laxative and I'm just having tummy troubles. He finds out later that he's running into the bathroom to take notes of everything that Bender is saying, because they're here kind of like, what's going on with the IFSB? But after their interrogation's over, they just kind of yuck it up as friends, And then they leave. Bender starts cleaning up, and he notices, looking at an armchair, it looks like someone is sitting in it. He can see a depression. And he's looking at it, and he's somebody there, and then the depression's gone, like the thing stood up, and he's like, what the heck? I've been able to see you every time. Now you're coming in being invisible so you can spy on me? And about this time, he feels a hand on his shoulder. He describes it as a cake of ice. And he is petrified, doesn't know what to do. But finally he turns and is staring directly at the Flatwoods monster. And he passes out. And when he wakes up, he's got all the trash he'd picked up. It's all laying around him, but he's lying on the floor. It smells like sulfur in his room. Flatwoods monster. It's getting serious, y'all.
Getting serious.
So, there are other things that are going on in Bender's life. But again, he is taken away. The three men come to visit him. While he is sitting viewing the dais, a panel slides open in the wall. And out of this panel come three beautiful women. They are tall, but their skin is almost translucent, like you can see through the first layer. They have silvery hair, they're brought up in a bun, and there are three halos made of some metal that's not the metal he's sitting on. It's not the metal of the ship, but it's a different metal. And they're wearing skin-tight white clothing, and they come up to him, and Bender goes to get up. He's sitting on this metal bench, but he can't move. He's too stiff. Well, the women come up to him, and they are able to, as they touch him, his body goes limp in those places, but he doesn't have control. And they lay him out on the bench, and then just pick him up like a suitcase and haul him into another room. They set him on this table. It's like an operating table. So Bender gets a little panicked. But they start to undress him, and they remove all of his clothing and then step back to look.
Is this consensual?
I would say probably not. This is the abduction. This is the seed for the abduction experience. Okay. So he doesn't know what they're doing. Like, are they looking at me out of curiosity? What are they doing? Well, then one steps forward and removes his wristwatch. They were making sure they got everything. So, naked, laying on this table. Excuse me. He's fully naked. One of the women leaves. There's nothing over there. I'm just gesturing wildly because I forgot something.
Tyler just pointed across the garage as if he'd seen something important.
Before the women leave.
Oh, they're here.
They get a vial of clear liquid from somewhere. And they massage that clear liquid into every piece of available skin. He couldn't move, but he was spun around and flipped over so he could be completely covered with this stuff. They massaged it, and he's like, looking at their faces, I could not tell if they were experiencing any enjoyment, if they were experiencing disgust. He was like, there is just no emotion. I can't get a reading on these people for what they're doing. And when they rub this stuff in, his skin becomes very warm. Then...
Sounds like a good time to me.
Absolutely it does. Then this... it has to be consensual, though. You'd have to pay those women for that, Dustin.
No, you could just all be having fun.
It's fine.
It doesn't have to be transactional.
It doesn't have to be transactional.
Okay.
It could just be fun for everybody.
You're right. The machine shows up later, and that's when things really get fun. No, I'm kidding. It's a purple light. He feels hot all over his skin.
A purple light?
The purple light. Mm-hmm.
Like the librarian?
Yes.
Like the ghost librarian?
A helpful purple light. Hold on. Color is important. We'll have to look at color, temperature, and aura. Look, guys, quit distracting me. We're trying to get through this.
No. We're supposed to be talking to each other. It's not a race.
It's not the Tyler show.
Aww.
I told you. It's in the outline.
Oh, Tyler. This is why you don't do outlines, because you're too married to them once they are created.
That's it. We have to do it. Purple light. It is so deep and brilliant, but it doesn't hurt to look at. But it's almost like he can feel it. He goes to sit up, and from the shadows, someone comes up to push him back down. And this person, he describes them as wearing a habit with a hood and a face covering, but there are 2 eye holes. And he doesn't notice any eyes the first time that he sits up. But he lays back down, and he's like, no, that's kind of alarming. What if that's protective gear? What are they doing to me that I might need that protective gear? And so he starts to sit up again, but the creature pushes him down, and then when he looks up, he can see the glowing eyes through the eye slits, and the eyes communicate, this is beneficial for you, don't worry.
Okay.
So he lays there, and then the light gets dim, retracts, and he is encouraged to get dressed again. I don't know why they couldn't have helped him get dressed, but it's just him and this attendant wearing the nun's habit. And he gets dressed, and then he goes back out into the room with the Deus. Deus. Goes back out to the room with the Deus. And he sits down. And he notices that his skin is pink and still a little bit warm to the touch, but overall he feels pretty good. And then the Exalted One comes out. It's like, hey, that procedure you just went through, we implanted a device in you that will disintegrate you at the flip of a button. So don't tell anybody this story. But as a reward, we have inoculated you against cancer. You'll never get cancer. So don't worry about that. Also, we will be gone soon. And when we are gone, you can tell whoever you want about your story. They're not going to believe you anyway. You will know we have left when the metal token that we have given you disappears. When it is gone, you can do whatever you want. Let's add some personal life to Albert Bender. He got married to Betty on October 18th, 1954. She was from the British Department of Flying Saucers. He found her neatly penned application and was like, oh, that's a pretty application. And reached out to his contact in the British Bureau and was like, hey, get this person to send me a letter. And so they just started corresponding just because he liked the way her
handwriting.
See, kids, this is why you need to learn cursive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'll help you find.
You can meet your partners, your future partners.
And with her job, she wins a trip to the United States. So that's when she gets to visit Bender for the first time. They go to New York. They travel. She's a little redhead. They don't talk about flying saucers much. They talk about how straight the roads are in New York.
Did you say she's a little redhead?
She's a little redhead.
Okay.
She's not a tall redhead, Sarah.
Gotcha.
It says she's a little redhead.
Okay, that's fine.
She's 5'1".
Okay.
Betty is a 5'1" redheaded woman.
No, it's fine, Tyler. It's fine. It just threw me for a minute.
Her eyes don't glow. They found love through the Flying Saucer Club. Okay.
Man, Tyler's getting saucy.
He keeps checking after he gets married. He keeps checking over and over because he hasn't even told his wife about these experiences, And he keeps checking his lockbox. The metal token is still there. Anyway, a year after they had been married, Betty asked why he really closed the International Flying Saucer Bureau, and he says he can't tell her. And he's like, well, I'll make up some stories, and you can decide which one you want to believe is why I did it. But he's like, I can't tell you the truth yet. So even to his wife, he's like, well, we can play a fantasy game. April 1956, Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers comes out, and Bender becomes a bit of a celebrity again because it's his story. It's all Barker's speculation, but it's Bender's story.
And his speculation is the stuff that sounds more like the Men in Black.
That's right.
Yeah.
One night at 2 a.m., an anonymous caller rings Bender's house and is like, hey, Long John is talking about you on the radio. Go listen.
Who?
Long John.
Okay.
And this is Long John Nebel, who did a radio show from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. in New York City.
Okay.
And he talked to a lot of different weirdos. But anyway, after listening to himself on the radio and things seemed favorable, he was like, oh, maybe I can start writing about it. And so he starts typing out his story. And
Why didn't he just check for this coin?
He did. It's still there.
Oh, okay.
But he's like, I'm going to try it anyway. So he goes and types out the first page, and he's just flying through the first page, second page. Gets to about the fourth page, and his head is hurting so bad that he just can't deal with it. And then he starts to smell the sulfur, and then his phone starts ringing. He goes to answer the phone, and he hears a staticky dial tone. And then he hears the warning to stop writing and remember that we implanted a device that can disintegrate you. So he goes back into the room where he was typing, and he smells the strong odor of sulfur, and the 4 pages that he had written are gone. They've disappeared. They are not in existence. Someone has taken them from his room.
It's funny that they've told him on 2 occasions that he can say whatever he wants. Nobody's going to believe him. But they keep trying to hide it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would they care?
Mm-hmm. And
maybe
then,
they're not the same person.
Could be.
Do you know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
it's 2 different.
They've interpreted their orders differently.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Well, or who told him he could tell whoever he wants?
That was the
guy at
they
Antarctica.
implied. Nobody's going to believe you anyway, so it doesn't matter.
But that
But
was
then when he-
the
exalted one.
The exalted one, right?
Yeah.
But the exalted one isn't necessarily who is destroying his words and
The Men in Black are doing that, or these beings.
right.
In black.
And are they in alliance or not? Is the question.
Yeah. Unknown.
They may not agree.
Yeah.
So
Different in August 1959, Barker is on Long John Nebel's radio program. And the discussion turns into more of a debate, but Barker gets accused of sending the 3 man to bully Bender for a story. Like, that comes out in the radio show. And for the first time in the history of the show, the broadcast gets cut early. And so there's this whole big conspiracy. So it's just these little weird things that can happen to anybody. But when it happens, when you're talking about this stuff, it's like, oh, there's somebody else in control,
Like they got cut.
Their
Not
feed
by
got
choice?
cut. No.
Yeah, by feed got cut.
And then, like, the people in the studio didn't know it. They just kept going. But the feed went to music. There wasn't anything else to hear.
Now, was this at the part of the where they're accusing him?
So they
Or is
accuse
this
him,
after?
and it kind of gets heated, but then they calm back down and they start having an actual discussion about what the implications might be, and that's when the feed cuts. To make up for it, Long John is like, well, everybody come back on, we'll just rediscuss everything we did, but everyone was like, that's not the same. You know? Yeah. Anyway, so it's strange. Okay, so late 1960, Bender is digging through his closet looking for something, and suddenly he smells sulfur. So he grabs his lockbox, throws it open, and inside he is shocked to discover that the metal disc is gone, along with every other item that he had put in the lockbox. The disc is gone, but everything else is in there has just disintegrated to dust. He's excited now. This is his chance to tell a story. He contacts Gray Barker, and he's like, I'm ready to go. But he still keeps getting headaches. He goes to the doctor. Doctor can't find anything wrong. Bender comes to believe it has something to do with radiation damage. His headaches are from radiation. Toward the end of the book, Bender does a whole lot of reflecting. The being said Jesus Christ didn't exist, but Bender wasn't swayed. He's still a Christian at the end of his book. And then Barker ends the book with an epilogue and is like, don't get too brave, the MIB might get you. And so it's like, it really is like Bender is having some sort of unusual experience, but he is likely being pushed in a direction that he is already predisposed to.
He's being influenced.
But it's a crazy story. It's a wild story. I'm sorry it was so long.
I have one more thing that I wanted to just sort of put a little spotlight on.
Oh, a little like flashbulb eyeballs?
Little glowing purple light on this whole thing where, and you can maybe put this back in where we were talking about it. We got distracted talking about consent.
Consent is important.
No, it is important. So the thing with it, the undressing, this particular time period has a lot of sexy women aliens. Like the female aliens are always very lithe and white.
They are almost translucent.
And I don't know. I'm just putting a little light on that. Basically, the reason I'm shining a light on that is that actually makes this stuff less believable to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because it sounds like a horny guy. As opposed to a guy who's having a real lived experience.
At some point, we will have to talk about John Mack and all of his studies with abductee experiencers, because it is admittedly not sexy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, and that's a whole different thing. I'm just saying, like, anytime I hear one of these stories, and it is appears to be cis straight man telling it.
Yes.
And I hear that there is a attractive female whatever. Instantly I go, made up.
Yeah. Well, these three beautiful women with the long silvery hair and the three halos in their hair, like, they don't have a lot to say to him. In fact...
No, that's not surprising.
We can go into this. As he's sitting on this bench and watches them approach before they turn him into a suitcase and haul him off, he says he's watching their lips move. They are communicating, but they are completely ignoring him.
So they're objectifying him? By turning him into a suitcase?
I'm exaggerated by saying...
They're literally objectifying him.
Yeah. Yes. But he cannot hear... Like, he's never seen any of these beings' lips move, but he has heard their communication. But here, it looks like they're communicating, and he can't hear a thing. And he tries to talk to them, but he can't. And then he's just watching them. He doesn't... He can't interact with them. And so he does have this question about... Is this the females? Do they look as hideous as the males do when they change? And then it's like, if you can shapeshift, are you shape-shifting your genitals all the time? I mean, come on.
Why not?
Why not?
Well, I mean, like if you're Mystique, why not just not have your boobs sometimes if you need to do laser jump things, If you can shapeshift into anything, why bother with the stuff that isn't relevant for your task at hand?
You're referring to male gazy nonsense.
Yes.
Right. Gotcha. I hear that. I mean, the answer to your question is male gaze. That's why the boobs are still there, even when she's trying to get something done.
I know. And I know I'm the target demographic for such things. Not anymore. I've aged out of that, but...
That's true. It's so nice to not be the target demographic.
Of some things. But I think the big takeaway from Albert
Every time I talk about feminism, Tyler.
I think the big takeaway from Albert K. Bender's Men in Black experience is this has the seeds of all of the modern UFO stuff. From Men in Black to abduction to warnings about atomic weapons, cancer,
that's
environmental health.
That's part of what made me think like this is more of a multi-part, because I actually want to do a lot more talking about the influences that carry forward. But we have to have all of this backstory to get to that, right? And so there's a part of this where we're getting all the backstory, and then another part that's like some deep dive analysis and like, yeah, pop culture is folklore is, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I look forward to getting together and talking more about this.
Okay. But it's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content.
The other thing to point out is all the people who are reading the exciting sci-fi after World War II, all of the pulp sci-fi stuff, like the overlap in interest in flying saucers and science fiction novels, that's like the same. That's the same demographic. Those are the same people. So
fascinating.
It'd be interesting if there was another person that, say, had a book like this from now that have had an experience. Oh, I'm sure there is. But, but goes into that much detail in a book now, and how much the details that come out of their story is related to now instead of then. And then you know that you're heavily influenced by the time period that you're living in.
Yes.
And so were you shown that as a front? Or it's interesting that he went and did this, how he perceives it, but everything that he detailed is stuff that like would be in the movies around that time, would be in the comics. You know, it's so he's already exposed to all that. So nothing's new in his story other than, you know, it's like he was basically writing a sci-fi novel.
It's his perception
of
the
that
world
time period
from his influences.
Because even now when they're writing scientific stuff, still you could read it and still ground it to our time period.
Sure.
Like, because we don't know what's ahead of us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We can only guess. We're supposed to have flying cars right now.
Yeah.
So
as you were talking about that, I triggered on a memory of, well, so the book Stranger in a Strange Land, I was like, when was that published? Because it talks about a lot of very similar things. There's a lot of really beautiful women in it. Because, you know.
Well, it's Heinlein.
Yeah, because Heinlein. But also this whole religious Jesus component is a big piece of that. And all of these questions, you know, Bender's not the only one.
Of course.
That's asking a lot of questions about Jesus and Christianity as a part of these alien experiences. So, Stranger in a Strange Land was published in 1961.
Okay.
This is Wikipedia. This says that he got the idea for it in 1948. So, it makes me think, you know, like, he didn't hear about this from Bender, even if he did encounter him. But lots of people were thinking about what are the influences that we're not really privy to. that are causing all these different people. Heinlein is not saying he experienced an abduction, but he is telling a story that's so similar to stories that other people are saying they experienced at this time period. What do they call that? There's a name for it. Where different ideas pop up around the world simultaneously.
Yeah.
There's a term for that.
It's like the Nobel Prize is sometimes given to people in certain fields.
Multiple people have come up with the idea at the same time.
But independently on the opposite sides of the world. They're like, what happened with that? And John Keel would say, well, the great phonograph in the sky is transmitting that radio wave, and some of the people are receivers, and they picked it up. It was a long one today, guys.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
They're always good.
Is it too smoky?
Smoky?
Like
through the smoky?
Not literally. Yeah. It was. Did we go too far?
Yeah. Did we go too far? We can't find our way back.
Oh.
Everybody
maybe.
stick with us.
Maybe. It took us a little while longer to find our way back.
We weren't
But
off.
I don't think
we
there's
weren't
such
off
a thing as
the
too
rails.
far. No.
So.
All right,
Through
great.
The smoke.
Yep.
I don't think there is.
Next time somebody else do a lot of the talking, because I'm going to try to enjoy my pipe a little more.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
How were your cigars?
Good. I had two. I had the Meadowlark, and then
What'd
I
you
ended
finish
it with Rocky Patel Emerald.
All right.
It's a new one for me, too. And that one was really good. This one had what I was talking about, where the whole cigar is pretty much covered. So like this was at the foot, and then there was two bands up here.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how they're going nowadays. They're like they're getting kind of crazy with packaging.
I switched teas, and I don't think
Meadowlark
I talked about
is good.
Did you
Yeah.
talk about the tea I switched to?
We didn't talk about you started with your first tea, and then about halfway through we got another one.
Yeah.
What were you drinking?
So the other... No, I think I did talk about it, because
No, you
Dustin
didn't.
said it smelled really good.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
that
that's
was
all
while we were
said.
taking a break.
Oh, that
And
was
then
while
we started,
you were inside.
Yeah, and then when he came back, we were going to talk about because I started this about the same time, and we were going to talk about them. And then we got distracted, and you went into your thing.
Yeah.
My fault.
Yeah, talk about your tea. Tell the good folks.
So this tea is very easy to find. It's not small batch special.
Lipton.
It's not Lipton. It's Harney and Sons, which is pretty common. You can get that pretty much anywhere.
I drink
But
that London Fog.
This is hot cinnamon. It's just that's the name of it. It's just hot cinnamon.
It smells so good, but I
It's
love
so
cinnamon. So
yeah, it's really good.
Caffeine free?
No, black tea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, delicious. And it's not as expensive as this other stuff, so I drink it a lot. Yeah. That's right. So yeah, that was my second tea today. We did it, guys.
I think we're there.
I mean,
yeah.
I think we are too. Do you feel like you can get it all edited together?
There's something there.
There's definitely something.
There should be something there. Yeah.
I'm so proud of us.
All right.
Well, we're coming back through the smoke now.
Yeah. Back.
We found our way back.
Found our way back.
Yeah.
And, thanks for joining us. Check us out on Instagram.
Oh yeah, we got a lot of pictures we're gonna post from this episode. So.
Yeah, I gotta get it. I'm glad you were making a list.
Yes.
I don't know if we ever got around to talking about female men in black. Well,
till then.
Yeah.
Yeah, the airplane's playing us
gotta
out.
have an airplane.
Oh, let me look at my notes. Okay.
It's on the outline.
All right. Well,
Play us off.
I read it in the paper, I saw it in the sky. A saucer swooped past the water tower high. Albert Bender said, son, they know your name. Then the lights cut out and the black suits came. Eyes like flashbulbs, skin like steam. They move like a whisper and inside my dream. A scent of sulfur, a voice like chrome said, we come to make your heart our home. Ooh, I fell in love with the unexplainable. Blue ghosts dancing in the radio cables. Gray Barker's notes in a motel drawer, and I'm being too perfect to ignore. Tall, dark, handsome, no name, no shame, and I never saw the world the same. Flatwoods whispers in the West Virginia pines, stars blinking out, perfect lines. They touched my hand and I felt the spark, like a jukebox kiss in a trailer park. Flying saucer mags on the back room floor, truth and pulp that I can't ignore. They leaned in close, said you already knew. I said I don't want Earth if I can't have you. Ooh, I fell in love with it, the untouchable. Their smile cut deep, but it felt so wonderful. Eyes like science, voice like song. I was only human, but I played along. Sulfur and velvet and static air. Love ain't fair, but it's out there. So if your mirrors hum and your lights go red, and you dream of stars you've never set, just follow the glow past the county line. That's where the exalted ones shine. Tell Barker I'm gone, I ain't coming back.